Chapter 25. Dragons, Training, Mission. Ichigo's house, underground training room. The teenage Soul Reaper gave a content sigh as he relaxed in the healing hot spring after his training session. Today was the last day of school before the summer break began. After the recent incident involving the three factions declaring peace at Kuo Academy, Slycer had ordered for Rias and all the girls of her peerage to move in with Issei. Of course, both Koneko and Ichigo had refused. After many negotiations, a compromise was reached with the pseudo-siblings. For the school week, Koneko would stay at Issei's house, newly renovated into a luxury hotel suite, but for Friday nights and the weekend she could stay over at Ichigo's. She was also able to visit and spend the day at Ichigo's house whenever she wished, provided that she had no devil duties to attend to. Also, the teenage war hero was welcome to visit at Issei's place anytime. Speaking of the brown-haired pawn's home, it had been completely remodeled into something more akin to a luxury hotel than a house. With all the floors, spare rooms, and facilities the place held, Ichigo suspected that Slycer and Azazel planned to use it as a pseudo-base. At least for the younger people anyway. Deciding that he had soaked long enough, Ichigo stood up and prepared to dry off before getting dressed for school. Kuo Academy. The bell rang to signify the beginning of their lunch break. As Ichigo got up from his desk, he was approached by Akino. Like usual, this caused everyone else to start whispering among each other, along with the odd cry of despair that Ichigo was now unreachable. Ignoring the background noise, he raised an eyebrow at his raven-haired classmate. "Is something up?" he asked. "Not really," she answered with her normal smile. "It's just that Azazel-sensei asked if you could come over to the clubroom, preferably with Kuro and Nina. He said he has something to discuss with you." "All right, tell him I'll come over after school's out for the day." "I'll let the others know when I meet them on the roof," Ichigo informed her. "I will." With that, both teens left the classroom and went their separate ways. Rooftop. Ichigo, the Fragments and Koneko were sitting together and eating their respective lunches as normal. Kuro and Nina had just finished recounting the commotion that had occurred in their class, one involving Issei and his friends along with a perverted girl called Kiryu. "Anyway, I'm going to be heading over to the ORC with Koneko after school's over," the spiky-haired Soul Reaper told them. "Azazel said he had something he wants to discuss with me and preferably you guys as well." "Well, it's not like we really had any plans anyway," remarked Kuro. "So I guess we'll tag along too." ORC clubroom. Issei was just recovering from being told that they would all be spending their summer holidays in the underworld at Ria's family's territory. He felt a slight sadness that he'd have to cancel all the plans that he'd made with M&M, but he felt more excited about actually going to the Gremory territory and spending time there. The last time he'd been to the underworld was when Slycer had taken them for a celebration party for their victory against Riza. He was wondering how things were normally, at least in the area where Rias lived. Azazel was there too, occupying the chair that Rias usually sat in. He'd informed them that he'd also be accompanying them for the trip. The redhead heiress wanted to protest, but knew that she couldn't really change anything and reluctantly accepted. The door opened and in stepped Koneko, soon followed by Ichigo, Kuro, who was holding Shadow, and Nina. "All of you came. Perfect," Azazel remarked upon seeing them. "Right. Rias, since I'm pretty much done with your group, you can go home now. You can fill in Koneko along the way or something." After a round of brief farewells, the Gremory peerage exited the room, leaving Ichigo and the Fragments with the head fallen angel. As you may or may not know, Rias will be going with her peerage to her family home in the underworld, like she does every year. Slycer contacted me and said that a certain issue has appeared on the Gremory estate. He was asking if you could help sort it out. Ichigo folded his arms as he gave Azazel a neutral look. "I'm not some kind of errand boy, you know. Can't they sort out their own problems that happen at their home?" "Well, it's not exactly a normal problem," Azazel explained. "You see, some sort of strange spatial distortion has manifested in the forest near the family castle. Slycer suspects that it might be the work of a fragment. That, and the staff haven't had much luck in getting rid of it. Well, it's not like I had anything important planned out for the summer, Ichigo replied. I guess I'll go along and check it out. Count us in too, said Kuro. Besides, I'm actually pretty curious about where Ria's parents live too. Great, I'll let Slycer know, Azazel stated cheerfully. Meet up with us at Issei's place tomorrow at midday. You can hitch a lift with us. All right, we'll see you there, agreed Nina. The teens, along with Shadow, proceeded to leave the room, planning to make their way home. It looked like the start of their holidays was going to be pretty interesting. Next day, Issei's house. Everyone from the Gremory peerage was gathered just outside the entrance to Issei's transformed home. His parents were being sent on a fully paid expenses luxury break abroad for the duration they would be away at Ria's family home. Issei had mixed feelings about going there, but they mostly centered on excitement and anxiety. They'd been informed only last night that Ichigo and the fragments would be accompanying them also, something to do with a request from Slycer. Azazel was there too, checking his watch. They should be arriving around now, the head fallen remarked as he averted his eyes from the time. On cue, they all heard a greeting call out from ahead. Looking to the source of the sound, they saw Ichigo and their other friends walking towards them. Kuro was holding Shadow in one hand and waving with the other, so they assumed that he was the one who shouted out. Hey guys, you all set to go? Ichigo asked when they had reached them. Yes, we're already prepared and ready, assured Rias. Well, you kids can chat once you're all on the train, Azazel interrupted. Come on, let's go. Gremory Magic Train. The Kuo Academy students were all lounging about in a train car that they had to themselves, a perk of Ria's family owning the train that they were traveling on. At the moment, Rias was discussing something with Issei and Aisha about which area they'd like as their own territory from Ria's plot of land. Ichigo and his housemates were sat down reading either books or manga. Koneko was seated next to her pseudo-big brother, who was absent-mindedly ruffling her hair. A minuscule smile could be seen on her face if one looked closely enough. The door to Azazel's carriage suddenly opened as the head fallen stuck his head through. Hey Ichigo, he called. Would you mind coming here for a bit? There's something I need to talk to you about. In fact, bring the fragments too while you're at it. The orange-haired Soul Reaper stood up along with his friends before walking into Azazel's carriage. Azazel shut the door once they were all through. All right, listen up. Soon, I'm going to start a test with the others, which they haven't been told about. Their car's going to stop and they'll be ejected into a valley below. I've managed to get the cooperation of one of the former Dragon Kings, Tanin the Blaze Meteor Dragon. He's going to test their combat ability. Now I don't mind you guys watching from the side, but please don't interfere under any circumstances. Fair enough, Ichigo complied. But why are you pulling off something this drastic? Is it to prepare them for any future encounters with the Chaos Brigade? To an extent yes, but it's also for them to see how much improvement they need firsthand. Plus, it'll be good experience for if they're ever faced with an opponent more powerful than them in the future. So, do we get front row seats? Kuro asked. Azazel smirked. Of course. In fact, we're going to be starting right now. Meanwhile, the Gremory peerage felt a sudden lurch as their car unexpectedly halted. Oh. That's not supposed to happen, is it, Bucho? Issei asked as he picked himself off the floor. Rias dusted off her clothes. No, the journey is always smooth normally. There aren't any stops along the way either. Something's not right here. A large magic circle encompassed the floor before she could say anything further. With a collective shout of surprise, the full group phased through the cart's floor and began falling towards a rocky valley down below. Everyone sprouted their wings and slowed their descent so that they landed safely, if a little harshly. They looked up just in time to see the magic train vanish from sight. Oi, what the hell just happened to the train? Issei remarked. What's going on here? Bucho, do you think it's an attack? Asked Kiba as he drew his holy eraser. It's the only reason that I can think for all this, the redhead answered. The ground began trembling beneath them, making them all fight for balance. Not long after, a colossal figure stepped into view from a turn in the canyon. It stood on 2 legs and had 2 arms along with a powerful-looking tail and mighty wings. Large and well-developed muscles covered its scale-bound frame and its body was mostly a deep purple hue. "No way," breathed Issei in disbelief. "It's an actual dragon. A huge one." The dragon looked at them all for a moment. Then, licks of flame started to appear from its slightly parted jaws. "Everyone look out!" Rias cried. They all hastily leaped away from the fireball's path. The projectile promptly exploded upon impact with where they were seconds previously, destroying a good portion of the rock. "What power," said Zenovia in awe. "Everybody watch yourselves, we can't afford to get caught by an attack like that," Akino warned, taking to the air along with Rias. Sans Aisha, all of them readied themselves for combat. Koneko took a stance, Issei summoned the boosted gear, Kiba activated his Sword of the Betrayer balance breaker, Zenovia summoned forth Durandal, Akino shifted into her Miko garb and Rias readied her power of destruction in both hands. Ichigo and the fragments were watching everything unfold alongside Azazel from a higher, hidden vantage point. The Gremory Devils had realized from the beginning that this was a formidable foe, so they had gone for dealing big hits from the get-go. Unfortunately, even their best did nothing to actually damage the dragon they were facing, Tannin. As they realized this, they began to lose some of their drive and despaired a little, which reduced their overall combat ability. Azazel then signaled for them to follow him. "All right, that's enough," the black-haired man with gold bangs called out as he floated down on his wings. "Don't worry, you're not in any real danger. This was a test I set up with Tannin over there, a former Dragon King. I wanted you to see for yourselves how you would do when faced with an opponent out of your league." After clearing everything up and receiving feedback from Tannin, they all returned to the magic train and resumed their journey. Rias and her peerage were considerably more sober. Understandable, since Tannin's criticism had been a strong blow of brutal honesty. Issei was staring at his left hand pensively. He needed to get better at using Ascalon and channeling the dragon-slaying energy. He needed to properly unlock his balance breaker ASAP too. Gremory Castle. All those who had never been to the Gremory estate previously were now gawking in awe at the grand medieval-style castle. "I don't believe it," remarked Kuro. "Ria's family actually lives in a freaking castle. And it's huge too," Issei concurred. He then noticed the welcoming party of servants arranged in 2 lines, making everything feel even more surreal to him. Ichigo was inspecting the grand structure with his right hand propped under his chin and left hand supporting the opposite arm's elbow. "Man, these devils are really something else," he mused. "Still, I've got to say that this place does look impressive." Hearing a shout of joy, they all turned their heads to see a young boy that looked like a miniature version of Surzex running towards their group. "Aunt Rias, you're back," he cheered happily, running into the heiress and wrapping his arms around her waist. Ria smiled at the boy lovingly. "Hello Milikas, it's good to see you again. I'll be staying here for my summer break." The now named Milika's emerald eyes lit up. "Really? Yay, I can play with you and your peerage for a long time." His joyful attitude was infectious and soon everyone found themselves smiling to varying degrees. "Bucho, who is this kid?" Issei asked as he stepped over to the pair. "This is my nephew Milika's Gremory," Rias informed him. "He's my brother's son." Introductions were carried out between Milika's and those who hadn't met him previously. It seemed that Surzex had been telling him about Issei and Ichigo since he was ecstatic to finally meet the two in person and commented that they were so cool. He was also quite intrigued with Shadow, especially with how it could switch between its pet and the battle forms. Azazel told the group that they should settle in whilst he took care of some Grigory-related matters. He said that he would give each member of the Gremory peerage their personal training schemes and discuss it with them after the Young Devils meeting, after they were told who their first match would be against. Without wasting any more time, the Governor-General of the Fallen took his leave. As the staff were taking everyone's things to their respective rooms, Surzex came out and greeted them. He briefly embraced Milika's, then requested for Ichigo and the fragments to accompany him so that they could speak in private. So, what exactly is going on that you needed to call us over for it? Ichigo asked once they were in a room away from everyone else. Yes, I'll get to that. I'd just like to thank you for agreeing to help first. Surzeka's small smile of appreciation quickly vanished as his expression became serious. A few days ago, a strange spatial anomaly appeared in one of the forests nearby the family castle. Of course, some of our staff tried to investigate it. They said that once they'd crossed the boundary, it was as though they had been transported to another dimension. Not only that, but it would seem the entire area is filled with shadowy creatures and has a constant oppressive pressure. Thankfully, they were all able to leave safely by simply exiting the way they entered. The friends took a moment to absorb everything that Surzeka had just told them. Kuro folded his arms across his chest. So you think this is the work of a fragment? Yes, I believe. So, the redhead replied. Azazel agreed as well when I informed him regarding the matter. Of course, my family is willing to provide any help we can, whether it may be food and supplies or even extra members to assist you. Thanks, but you don't need to send anyone in along with us, Ichigo waved off. Just give us some supplies for when we go to check it out. Also, since this seems like an issue which will take some time, we're probably going to need to spend a few nights here as we go in and out of the place. Surzeka smiled good-naturedly. Of course. We already have rooms prepared for each of you. We will provide supplies each time you wish to venture into the distortion, in addition to food and treatment if needed whenever you return. Then I suppose that's settled, remarked Nina. Wonderful, said Surzeka. Unfortunately, I must take my leave and return to my duties as a Mao, but please do join Ria's peerage and my parents for dinner. They should already be on their way, just ask one of the staff to guide you. Dining hall. The entire group, plus Ria's mother, who looked exactly like her daughter only with brown hair, and father were sat at a long wooden dining table in an expansive hall. All those who hadn't been here previously were feeling slightly out of place, an effect only increased by the fancy cutlery. Suddenly, Zioticus addressed Issei. Issei-kun? Why yes, the brown-haired pawn responded a little jumpily. Do you like your new house? Ria's father asked. Very much. I'm deeply thankful for what you've done, my parents as well. The Gremory patriarch smiled. I see. That is good, and you are welcome. I originally intended to give you your own castle similar to this one, but was told that it wouldn't be appropriate. Oh. Issei was feeling nervous and couldn't really think of any way to advance the conversation. On the other hand, Ichigo and his fragment housemates were staring at Zioticus in disguised disbelief. Wow, he seems like a really nice guy, but at the same time really unaware of many social customs in normal society, the teenage Soul Reaper thought. Issei-kun, tell me, do you like Ria's? The man asked. His daughter became as crimson as her hair, looking down in embarrassment. Yes, very much. Issei answered somewhat nervously. I consider her to be someone very important to me. The girl in question smiled slightly at his words. Zioticus gave a relieved smile. Wonderful. He looked at the Red Dragon Emperor approvingly. Issei-kun. You may call me father. The reactions were mixed. Ria's blush deepened even further, half the group sweat dropped, Ria's mother kept a neutral face, and Ishigo's expression displayed open disbelief. Wow, this guy is really on another level with the social ineptitude, the young war hero thought. Dear, you mustn't rush, Venelina chided lightly. I've told you that there's an order to these kinds of things. Sorry, I may have gotten too excited and ahead of myself, Zioticus apologized. Still, I would like it very much if you could call me that, Issei-kun. The man's wife gained a slight yet intense aura. Dear, she warned with a smile. Recognizing the threat, Lord Gremory backed down and held his tongue from saying anything further on the matter. He then set his gaze upon Ichigo. Ichigo-kun, do you have any interest in becoming a devil? The orange-haired substitute gave him an apologetic smile. Sorry, but my answer is no, he replied calmly. I plan to remain human for the rest of my life. Well, I suppose that's just too bad, Ria's father remarked neutrally. His pleasant and friendly air was still about him, so he wasn't angered or too upset by the refusal. Indeed, agreed Ria's mother. It would have been very nice to have you as one of us. She turned her focus to the Red Dragon Emperor. Issei-kun, during your stay here I will be educating you on high-class devil society and etiquette. Was the teenage pawn's intelligent response. It was at this point that Ria's had enough. She stood up from her chair whilst slamming her palms into the table, looking at her parents angrily. I can't take this anymore. Mother, father, just what do the two of you think you're doing? She demanded heatedly. Ria's, please sit down, her father told her evenly. No. Just how far do you plan to keep interfering with my life? Ria's, sit down, her mother commanded more forcefully. You need to realize that you can't keep acting so selfishly and simply do whatever you want. Do you realize how much trouble your father had to go through to break off your engagement to Riza? To keep the elders happy, he had to tell them my daughter didn't like the idea, so she used the power of the Red Dragon Emperor to forcefully break it off and similar things. Sirzex too. Ichigo almost spoke out at that remark, but held his peace since it seemed that the brown-haired woman didn't necessarily support the almost forced marriage, rather she was just trying to make her daughter aware of something. He never should have done that engagement in the first place. Ria snapped. Yes, maybe he shouldn't have, but you need to realize that if you only look out for yourself and do whatever you fancy, it will reflect badly on Sirzex and us. What? How does any of what I do affect Sirzex? Venalina cut off. I assure you it affects him plenty. People know that you're the younger sister of a Mao, thus they attribute what you do towards him. You have more eyes on you than you realize. Now stop having a tantrum and sit down. The redhead teen didn't retaliate and obeyed, significantly more subdued than she had been moments ago. The atmosphere was still charged though, the tension clinging to them thickly. I'm sorry, Ria's mother apologized. I've just made all of you see something rather unpleasant. No one said anything in response, the dinner being completed in silence. The next day, Gremory Territory Forest Edge. Ichigo, Kuro, Nina, and Shadow stood with Zeoticus at the entrance to the spatial distortion. The air was constantly rippling and swirling like water. It gave off a strange and ominous sensation. Here it is, the Gremory Patriarch stated. Thank you again for going through the trouble of dealing with this for us. Ichigo waved him off good-naturedly. It's fine. Just please don't make a habit of calling on me though. Zeoticus looked at the rippling space. I don't expect you to complete this task by today or tomorrow. From what our staff who investigated have told us, the area inside is very expansive. Of course, you are all more than welcome to stay here with us for however long it takes to deal with this. Thank you for your generosity, said Nina. She turned to Ichigo. Well, do you want to make a start? The orange-haired Soul Reaper nodded in affirmation. I think it would be best. Kuro summoned his sword to his free hand, holding onto Shadow with the other arm. Let's get going then. The group stepped forth and walked into the swirling distortion, disappearing from Lord Gremory's view. What they entered was a completely different realm. The sky overhead was a murky red filled with what looked like smoke. The ground was composed of dark grey stone. The air around them felt dense and oppressive. It smelt burnt and carried a slight undertone of BLD. The spiky-haired teen moved forward a little, scanning their surroundings. A large lake filled with oddly translucent scarlet liquid was situated to the right. On the left was a clear, rocky expanse with what looked like a forest in the distance. Ahead of them was a large, imposing gateway made of brick, beyond which lay a sizable courtyard paved with matching bricks. At the end of the courtyard stood a dark and sinister castle. The gargantuan construct dwarfed anything else they could see, and its midnight black coloration made it stand out. Suddenly, multiple shadows appeared around them and coalesced into solid figures. They were roughly humanoid, but lacked any definite features and possessed scythe-shaped blades instead of hands. Ichigo and his friends prepared for battle as the hostile beings pounced at them. The teenage substitute bisected one of them mid-swing with his oversized Zanpakuto. He flash-stepped over to another and impaled it through the chest. Both of them dissolved into a shadowy substance that rapidly dispersed. Meanwhile, Nina flash-froze 3 of them, then shattered them along with the ice. Kuro decapitated one before disemboweling another whilst Shadow ripped apart one that had tried sneaking up on him from behind. Ichigo replaced Zangetsu on his back, all the enemies now vanquished. Were those things fragments? No, they weren't, Kuro answered. They felt similar, but different. Their signature felt a bit like those soldiers the fragment that was with Nemesis can make, Nina stated. But they feel similar to this entire place too. Yeah, something does feel off about this place, Ichigo admitted. What exactly do you mean though when you say that they fell similar to it? I think we're dealing with a fragment that can make those shades, said Kuro. And it's generated this dimension too, like how some fragments were able to make their own barriers. No, it's not that, Nina refuted. To me, it seems more like this whole space is alive. I think this entire realm is the fragment. That's gonna be troublesome, Ichigo sighed. How do we get rid of it when we're technically inside it? Not to mention that it's pretty massive too. Kuro rested his chin on his free fist. There might be a core or central body, he theorized. If we can manage to find it, destroying that should be enough to get rid of this distortion. Let's check out the castle ahead, Ichigo suggested. That place is giving off a strong sensation of being alive and watching us. His fragment friends agreed with him and they all began heading over to the dark structure. Fragment Castle, entrance gate. The group stepped up to the large wooden double doors. Another bunch of shades had attacked them in the courtyard, but this time they had been greater in number and more aggressive. Ichigo and Kuro tested the doors, pushing against one each. Surprisingly, they opened smoothly, swngng inwards with little resistance. They weren't sure whether to take that as a good sign or not. They were currently in a spacious entrance hall, with a grand staircase in front of them and a door on either side of them, the right one being blue and the left one red. There was a large circular design engraved on the floor just before the staircase, in the center of which stood a metal statue of a demonic-looking knight on a skeletal horse. Keep your eyes peeled, the orange-haired teen warned. This castle seems more hostile than outside, as if something could jump out at any moment. The doors closed shut on their own. Kuro walked over to one and pulled on it. Fortunately, it still opened. At least, we don't seem to be trapped inside. Maybe we should split up, Nina proposed. This place is just as huge inside as it looked from outside. All right, Ichigo consented. Kuro, you go with Shadow and check out what's beyond that blue door. Nina, you can come with me. We'll check the red one. If any of you gets into a tight spot, flare your presence out. They split up and went their separate ways, each pair keeping a cautious check on the surroundings. Ichigo pushed open the door and stepped through, holding it open for Nina, then let go, allowing it to slowly close on its own. The room they just entered was medium-sized and composed of grey stone walls with an obsidian floor. There was a long wooden table with matching chairs, but nothing laid out on it. At the far end was what appeared to be a stone stove. A few wooden crates were situated at the wall near it. Apart from that, the room was quite empty. As Ichigo turned to leave, 3 clumps of shadow manifested in the room, rapidly condensing into shades. Grabbing Zangetsu from his back, he flash-stepped over to one and rammed the point of the blade into its chest, promptly ending it. Nina shot an icicle into the head of another. The last one was finished off by both of them, Ichigo throwing a lightning bolt at it followed by Nina creating a spike of ice from the ground and impaling it. I doubt we'll find anything here, let's head back, the spiky-haired Soul Reaper stated, replacing his weapon to its usual place. The navy-haired girl nodded in agreement and the duo left the room. Back in the entrance hall, they noticed an alcove behind the stairway. Moving over to check it out, they found what looked like an old, rusty key next to a lever. They took the key and pondered for a moment or two over whether or not they should test the lever. Eventually, they decided to leave it alone, Ichigo stating that they would pull it when they were all regrouped. They then decided to go through the blue door and hopefully find their two friends. With Kuro and Shadow. The twin fragments inspected the room after stepping past the blue door. It looked like some kind of medieval armory, with a line of knight armor suits against the wall ahead. The wall next to them had a few crates of shields and swords. Thankfully, none of the objects in the room came to life and attacked them. Unfortunately, a swarm of 6 shades did appear though. After dealing with the shades and slaying the last one, they returned to examining the room. Kuro walked closer to one of the walls, where a strange circular device was mounted. It looked like an oversized cog with turquoise glyphs that he couldn't decipher engraved into the rim. In the center was a handle that he assumed was meant to be twisted. A slightly raised, square-shaped platform was on the ground just in front of the device. On the adjacent wall, Shadow was checking an old-looking, locked metal door. "Hey buddy, let's head back to the others," Kuro suggested, stepping towards the center of the room. "We can check out this weird cog and that door together." Just as Shadow moved over to his side, the door opened, followed by both Ichigo and Nina entering. The orange-haired war hero waved in greeting. "Hey guys. Managed to find anything?" The black-haired fragment shrugged. "Sort of. We were going to come back to you too and tell you about it." He indicated to the cog-shaped device. "There's that big cog thing over there, and that locked metal door over there. We found this key just a while ago," said Nina, showing the mentioned object. "Maybe it's for the door?" She went over to the door and tried the rusty key. Soon, there was a click as the lock opened. Upon opening the metal barrier, they found a small space inside which was a ceremonial trident. It didn't seem to be intended for use as a weapon. Not knowing what it could be for, the group opted to leave it be for now. They went over to the cog-shaped device in the other wall. All of them were stood on the raised platform. Mentally preparing themselves, Ichigo took hold of the hand and twisted it. There was a mechanical clanking sound as the cog started turning, followed by a sudden rumbling. The platform they stood on briefly shook before it began to descend, going beyond the room's floor and taking them down with it. After almost 2 minutes, it eventually came to a stop, leaving them staring into a large stone cavern illuminated via azure flames provided by regularly spaced wooden torches mounted along the walls. Behind the group was another mechanical cog, identical to the one above. They moved off the platform together, taking in the new environment. The space looked naturally formed, the stone composing it smooth. To the right was a big pool filled with what appeared to be the same translucent scarlet liquid as the lake above near the entrance of the dimension. In front of them was a stone slab mounted on the wall, with 3 narrow slits carved into its surface. "This place just gets crazier and crazier," Kuro muttered. "I can see why Lord Gremory said he didn't expect us to finish within a day or 2. "Yeah," Nina agreed. "It's not just that either. There seems to be a lot of puzzles in order to advance further. There might even be traps later on. This fragment is pretty smart." "All the more reason to stay alert," Ichigo declared. "This entire realm is the fragment, so I'm willing to bet that it's more than aware of us being inside it at this point. It could ambush us with a swarm of its shades, or throw something else at us." As if the fragment had heard the teenage substitute's speech, a large number of shades formed out of nowhere all around them. This was the largest amount that they had encountered yet. The friends took battle stances and prepared for the onslaught. "This is getting annoying real fast," Ichigo huffed, firing a nameless Getsuga at a bunch of shades that had leaped towards him. "Let's clear them out quickly so we can check out that stone slab." Nina donned her sleek battle armor, hurling a blast of ice at some enemies. "Got it!" All of them focused on defending against the multitude of hostiles whilst maintaining a firm offense at the same time. They had a feeling that this situation was going to become unfortunately common during their ventures to find the fragment's core and destroy it. "Oh make!" The group stepped through the rippling air, entering the spatial distortion. Suddenly, they heard a loud boom from behind them. Turning around to check the source, they gaped in awe at the massive stone gate that met their sight. It looked to be firmly shut, probably what had caused the boom. "Hey, who are you guys?" demanded a voice that none of them recognized. Turning back, they saw a silver-haired man in a long red trench coat. He had a handgun in each hand, one an ivory color whilst its twin was ebony. A relatively long double-edged sword was held on his back. He raised one of his guns at them. "Well, you gonna answer me or not?" "Hold up, we're not here to fight you," said Ichigo, displaying his hands non-threateningly to placate the man. "We were trying to help a friend's father with a problem when we suddenly ended up here." "You don't seem like demons," the man remarked, but kept his firearm raised. "Well, besides that one over there," he added, indicating to Shadow. He then gestured at Kuro and Nina. "You two have a somewhat dark aura though." "What are you?" "All three of them are fragments," Ichigo answered. He then continued with a bit more force. "And they're all good guys as well as my friends, so I'd appreciate it if you stopped waving your gun at them." The man chuckled at the orange-haired teen before lowering his weapon. "Heh, you've got guts, kid. I like that. All right, I'll take your word for it. The name's Dante. I'm a freelance demon hunter. A client came and told me that the demon King Mundus is trying to break through to our world by creating a portal here, at Mallet Island. Long story short, I'm here to make sure that doesn't happen. So I'm guessing that castle's where he's trying to force his way through?" Kuro asked. "Yep. Mind if we tag along?" Ichigo inquired, getting an ominous feeling from the structure. "I think there might be a reason why we were brought here. We can take care of ourselves, so you don't need to worry about having to babysit anyone." Dante began walking off towards it, making a lazy waving gesture. "You kids and your friend can do whatever you want. Just try not to get in my way." The group started moving after the silver-haired man in the red coat, approaching the ancient castle together. Chapter 26. Castle Raids and Cats. Ichigo incinerated the final shade using a blast of widespread fire from his shock burner. The group took a minute to let themselves recover before making their way over to the stone slab. Kuro ran his fingers over the trio of slits in its flat surface. "What do you think these could be for?" the green-eyed fragment queried. "Keys?" Ichigo stared at the niches closely. "Maybe. Or, they could be for that trident we found upstairs. It looks like it could fit in pretty neatly. It might be some kind of elaborate SWCH." Nina shrugged. "There's no harm in trying, right?" The group retreated back to the platform. Ichigo twisted the handle, causing it to rise up and take them back to the previous room. Once there, Nina quickly went to grab the ceremonial trident while the rest waited for her on the platform. Thankfully, no shades decided to appear and attack them even after they were back down in the cave and once more standing before the stone slab. The dark navy-haired girl carefully aligned the trident's prongs with the slits before slotting it in. It fit in smoothly, followed by a soft click as the trident locked into place. A deep grinding sound echoed around the cavern as a small section of the wall just above the SWCH retreated into the part next to it. Within the newly revealed alcove was an ornamental skeleton key with a red gem encrusted in the handle. Nina cautiously removed it from its place, her hand thankfully remaining intact. "This'll probably come in handy later on," she remarked as she faced the others. "Yeah, it could be for one of the rooms up the staircase at the entrance," Ichigo agreed. "We might as well go there now," Kuro stated. "I doubt we'll find anything else useful here at this point. Plus, we've already searched the two side rooms near the entrance." Suddenly, Shadow began growling threateningly. He was facing the pool of red translucent liquid, his bright yellow eyes narrowed. A strange, wordless singing sound started coming from the edge of the pool, along with an unnatural blue glow. The teenage Soul Reaper tensed in preparation and drew Zangetsu from his back. Similarly, Kuro held Diablo at the ready and Nina had a slight frost emanating from her palms. The strange singing grew a little louder. An ever so slight haze also settled over Ichigo's mind as well as Kuro's, and by the looks of it Shadow's too. Nina seemed hardly affected, if at all. "Oi King, don't fall for the trick," his inner hollow warned. "Indeed, you must resist the pull," Ichigo supplemented Zangetsu. "The fragment is attempting to lower your guard and assassinate you. Slowly, multiple figures rose up from the pool's surface and leaned against its edge. There were around 10 in total. They were different to the shades in quite a few ways. For one thing, they were a pale light blue color, even more than the glow that was coming from the pool. Another difference was that they possessed definite features as well as forms, having a clearly female appearance and slender body type along with long, flowing, and somewhat ethereal-looking hair. Coupled with all that, they had sparkling cerulean eyes. If it weren't for the fact that they were creatures generated by the fragment and therefore a death trap, they could have been considered as appealing. Don't give in to the Singing King, Ichigo's pale doppelganger reiterated. Unless of course you really want to. To be honest, I don't think I'd blame you if you did. Maybe you could find a way to isolate them from the fragment's authority. The spiky-haired teenager blocked the voice out in annoyance, making a note to give the hollow a good kick next time he went to his inner world. Without even acknowledging the azure beings, he started striding over to the platform that would return them to the room above. "Come on guys, let's go," he commanded. "I'm not dumb enough to go chasing some half-baked, wannabe sirens that this fragment made to kill us." Kuro's teeth flashed in a smirk. "Right. They're not even real anyway." As the group moved away from the singing femme fatale, their wordless melody dropped to a more despondent tune tinged with sorrow. Glancing back, Ichigo saw that they had their hands out towards them, as though pleading. He pointed his trusty Zanpakuto in their direction threateningly, halting their singing. They sent him surprisingly realistic expressions of hurt and fear, but he pushed it to the back of his mind and kept their true nature at the forefront. Satisfied with their silence, Ichigo turned around and continued along with the others. Just before they stepped onto the platform, they heard a sudden snarling from behind them. Quickly spinning on their heels, all of them got ready for a confrontation. It seemed as though the pseudo-sirens had decided to display their true colors. Gone was the facade of alluring gentleness, replaced by a savage visage. Their eyes were fully black like an endless abyss, their nails had lengthened out into foot-long, serrated claws, and their teeth ended in sharp points, much like a shark's. One of them pounced at the group, her claws outstretched. Nina hurled a blast of ice at it, knocking it down mid-flight. Upon reaching the stone floor, the siren disintegrated into azure flecks of energy that rapidly vanished. As the rest of the monsters lunged, the friends charged forth to meet them head-on. Kuro impaled one on his black blade, stabbing it through the chest. Like the previous one, it burst into azure flecks that immediately disappeared. Ichigo flash-stepped over to another and bisected it from the head down, using his free hand to shoot an arc of lightning into a different one. Both of them were promptly vanquished. Shadow deflected a set of claws using its own, then ripped apart the offender before pouncing onto another and slashing it to ribbons. Nina flash froze 3 of the sirens, then shattered them along with the ice. She took care of the last one remaining by spearing it using a spike of ice generated from the ground just in front of herself. With all of them now dead, the blue glow coming from the pool also faded away, leaving the translucent red liquid as it once was. "Well, that was definitely something," Kuro remarked, dismissing his sword. Ichigo sheathed Zangetsu and returned it to his back. "Yeah. Looks like the fragment's capable of creating more than just the shades. Make sure to stay alert. Let's get going before it throws something else at us," Nina suggested. "Actually, let's head back to the Gremory Castle for now," said Ichigo. "We've been in this place for a while. Let's head back and rest up, maybe even grab something to eat. We can come back later if we want, or tomorrow." They returned to the room above, then to the main entrance hall. A small group of shades assaulted them, but they quickly took care of it. Opening the large castle doors, they left the dark building unhindered. Surprisingly, nothing attacked them at all as they made their way across the courtyard and towards the dimension's exit. When they passed the large lake, Ichigo felt an unusual shift in the atmosphere, as if something was watching them. The orange-haired hero scanned the surroundings. Nothing seemed out of place, well as far as he could tell anyway. Still, the odd feeling persisted. "Hey man, you okay?" asked Kuro. "Yeah, I'm fine," the teenage substitute assured. "Just can't shake the feeling that there's something around here and it's spying on us." Really? I've been getting a vibe like that too, Nina revealed. Since nothing was jumping out at them, Ichigo shrugged indifferently. Well, looks like there's nothing to worry about for now. Let's get out of here before whatever it is decides to greet us. Gremory Castle's men's bathroom. The young Soul Reaper sat down in the pool of warm water, releasing a content sigh as he relaxed. After returning from the fragment dimension, they'd been received warmly by one of the castle serving staff. Since nobody had been injured, they didn't need any medical attention, so they were left to go to their own rooms. When they were all called to the dining hall, they reunited with Riaz and her peerage, along with Azazel. From their account of the young devil meeting, some of the others seemed like quite a rowdy bunch. Also, the elders sounded like they were a group of arrogant racists who needed a good kick up the backside. It was probably a good thing that Ichigo hadn't been there, otherwise he most likely would have done that, especially when they started laughing at Sona's dream of building a rating game school that was open to all devils regardless of their social standing. After things had settled, the first rating game was set to be between Riaz and Sona's peerages. Both had a month to train and prepare. The orange-haired teenager leaned against the edge of the bath, recalling the short conversation that he'd had with Zeoticus. He'd recounted what they'd come across and encountered in the dimensional distortion to the Gremory Patriarch. The crimson-haired man told Ichigo to be careful around the lake near the entrance, as some of the staff who had ventured in at the beginning reported that they felt as though there was something growing within the body of unnatural liquid. Ichigo was brought out of his musing by the sound of 3 splashes. Craning his head, he saw that Azazel, Issei, and Gasper had joined him. "Hey, you look like you've been having quite the day," Azazel greeted chirpily. The orange-haired protector sent him an easygoing smile. "You don't know the half of it." "Yeah, Kuro told me that some pretty crazy stuff happened in that dimensional space you guys went to today," Issei remarked. "You're amazing, Ichigo-senpai," the Dampier exclaimed. "To think, you're so reliable that Sir Zek-sama personally asked you to take care of a problem." Ichigo smiled wryly at him. "I don't think that's exactly why I was called in, but thanks for the compliment, Gasper. I hope you can tell me more about it sometime," said Azazel. "It sounds like something that'll be pretty interesting to hear, as well as research into." "Sure," Ichigo complied. He then tuned out his companions when Aizen started talking to Issei about how he was making individual training regimes for each of them. Soon enough, they heard several recognizable feminine voices coming wall the barrier. The 2 perverts sharing the bath with him somehow shifted onto the topic of harems and mixed bathing. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Azazel suddenly grab Issei and swiftly toss the shouting teen over the separation. The leader of the Fallen began laughing freely when he heard the commotion that ensued. Rather than being angry at Issei's literal drop-in, it seemed as though Riaz and Aquino had decided to try holding and washing him. "It's getting a little too noisy in here for my liking," Ichigo stated, standing up and making his way to the exit. "I'm gonna go call it a day." "Sure," Azazel replied. Gremory Territory Forest Edge. Ichigo and his housemates once again exited the fragment dimension. It had been slightly over 2 weeks since their first venture into the distortion, and they had taken many trips into it since. It turned out that the key they found earlier unlocked one of the 2 doors that were up the stairs, but the other remained firmly closed. Through it was a large ballroom room that led into an open and rather spacious orchard. At almost every turn, though, they'd been assaulted by swarms of shades. At the end of the orchard, in an old stone well, was another ornamental key, but with a different design. They returned to the entrance hallway and attempted to use the key on the remaining door, but it didn't work. Without any other leads to follow, the group decided to try exploring the forest outside the castle. It was made a little easier since there was a clear dirt path that they could follow. As usual, they were sporadically attacked by clusters of shades. However, among the twisted foliage a different type of enemy also made itself known. Like everything else that they had encountered so far, they had a roughly humanoid shape and build, although their general features were more reptilian. The majority of their bodies were covered in oddly leafy-looking green scales. The ones on their torsos were a yellow color, like the leaves in autumn. Their more deadly aspects involved numerous small yet pointy spines running along their back, sharp claws on both hands and feet, and a wide jaw lined with razor teeth. Another irritating thing about them was that they were surprisingly agile. After around an hour of walking deeper into the trees, they came across the entrance to a stone tomb. The key from the orchard was used to unlock the door and grant them access. The inside was lit by regularly spaced wooden torches mounted along the walls, casting a soft orange glow over everything. Grey, slate steps took them down underground, into an expansive crypt system. Again, shades jumped out at them every now and then. There were also chalk white figures that assaulted, looking exactly like the shades, but inversed. Upon reaching the deepest and final area of the tomb, they had to deal with what appeared to be a zombified dragon. Despite having the appearance of a decaying corpse, it possessed a lot of physical strength and was highly resistant to fire, as well as capable of breathing out its own purple-tinged flames. They eventually managed to overwhelm it with a relentless barrage of attacks, ending with Nina flash freezing its entire body. She made the ice penetrate through to the bones before shattering it. Among its remains was another ornamental skeleton key in addition to a deep purple orb the size of a fist. They took both items along in case they were needed for later. Exiting the tomb, they continued along the dirt path, leading them ever deeper into the forest. Soon, the trees were all a dark grey color, as if they were carved out of stone. Eventually, the friends entered a circular clearing within the forest. Awaiting them in the center was a large Trent-like figure composed entirely of blackened wood. It stood at around 10 meters tall in height. The monster was quite slow and moved with a lumbering gait, but could swing its arms, which were covered in needle-like branches, with surprising speed and accuracy. Ichigo was able to make relatively short work of it, though using his shock burner Suzaku fire. Once it had been completely reduced to ash and turned to black mist that rapidly dissolved, another item was left behind. This one looked like a miniature shield or crest, with a leafless tree engraved into the center. Procuring it, they made their retreat out of the forest and returned to the castle. Once again trying the locked door up the stairs, they were rather relieved when the latest key obtained successfully opened the barrier. Beyond the door lay a strange room. Half of it was completely bare, save for the stone bricks that made it. The far half, however, was covered in thick, overlapping layers of what looked to be numerous twisted tendrils of flesh or a similar organic matter. They were various colors, ranging from pale and creamy to dark maroon. At the end, nestled in amongst the grotesque mass of flesh, was an obsidian door. Shrugging of the disgust and unease, they approached the door with caution. It was mostly smooth, save for the lightly embossed designs across its surface. Set into the middle was an alcove that matched the shape of the emblem they'd gained from the Treant. On either side of that was an indent of half a sphere. The one on the right had an icon of a dragon's head above it, while the one on the left had a similar marking that looked more aquatic. Ichigo asked for the emblem and slotted it into the niche, then placed the purple orb into the space under the dragon icon. As expected, the door didn't move. They guessed that the only way to get past was to find the final orb. At that point, Kuro suggested that they head back to the Gremory Castle and rest up, something that the rest all agreed to. Finally reaching the Gremory estate, the group split up to go relax and rest up individually. Issei was off training with the Dragon King Tanin, Kiba was also away to train with his old MSTR, and Gasper was taken somewhere to help overcome his low self-esteem and fear of other people. Aisha had been sent to a separate location as well. As Ichigo was about to move off in the direction of his room, he was unexpectedly approached by Akino. He sent a small smirk to the raven-haired queen. "You know, this is starting to become a thing. You being the one who comes to tell me that something's up." She gave one of her signature giggles in agreement. "I suppose it is. Could you please come by Koneko's room once you're done cleaning up?" The orange-haired Soul Reaper's protective instincts immediately kicked in. Did something happen to her? The concern in his tone was clearly detectable. Akino shook her head slightly. Nothing serious. She only overstrained herself in her training and is recovering at the moment. But, considering the bond you have with her, I think she could use some emotional support from you. You'll understand when you see. All right, I'll be there. Just give me a few minutes, Ichigo vowed. Koneko's room. Ichigo approached the large wooden door with a calm expression, hiding his inner worry. Akino was already waiting there for him. "Thank you for agreeing to this," she said before turning around. "As if I could turn it down," he remarked. "I'm not going to abandon my little sister when she needs me around." Akino smiled before lightly knocking on the door. A muffled come-in was heard from the other side. She moved out of the way so that Ichigo could enter. The spiky-haired teen gently pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room's curtains were drawn, but the light was on. Sitting up in her bed, looking tired and downcast, was Koneko. Except that there were now snow-white ears present atop her head, matching the rest of her hair. They were flattened down against the sides of her head, reinforcing the unhappy image. The petite rook's light hazel eyes widened when they caught sight of Ichigo, who wordlessly made his way over to the stool next to the bed and sat down, allowing him to see that she also possessed a tail. "Hey," he greeted softly. "How are you holding up?" Gotta say, the cat ears were unexpected. Koneko looked down at her lap. "I didn't want you to see them, Nii-san," she said quietly. "I don't like showing them, or my tail, showing what I really am." "Are you angry that I didn't tell you?" "No, not at all. Everyone's entitled to their personal secrets after all." "So, I'm guessing that you're some kind of nekomata?" Ichigo inquired. "Nekishu," she answered. The small girl seemed to withdraw into herself, as though feeling vulnerable. "Any reason you're so uncomfortable with that fact?" "You don't have to tell me anything if you don't want to, though." I used to have an older sister," Koneko revealed. "Both of us were orphaned at a young age. One day, a devil found us and took us in as his peerage members. Nekishu are amongst the most skilled users of senjutsu out of all other nekomata races. My sister, she was a prodigy at senjutsu. But one day, she went drunk with power from overusing it. She killed our MSTR and became a stray, leaving me behind." Her voice was starting to waver. Ichigo's hands clenched into fists and his jaw tightened, but he made no move to stop his surrogate sister. After that, everyone else became afraid that I'd also turn out like my sister, that I'd go berserk from using senjutsu. They were going to execute me, but Sir Zexama intervened. He was able to get permission for me to live and join Riesbucho's peerage as her rook. At this point, Ichigo threw all restraint to the wind, leaning forward to pull Koneko, who was freely crying now, into a tight, protective embrace. "I don't want to use senjutsu," the white-haired Nekishu sobbed. "I don't want to lose my mind and hurt those I care about. I don't need an evil power like that." The teenage substitute rubbed her back soothingly whilst she continued weeping. "Koneko, I'm sorry you had to go through any of that. I can't really say that I know what it feels like, but a few years back one of my close friends was about to be executed for something that wasn't really her fault. Me and a few others ended up storming the place and fighting against literally everyone else in order to save her. If I'd known you from before, when all that stuff was happening to you, I swear I'd have done the same." Koneko calmed down somewhat. "I believe you, Nii-san." "Thanks." "Koneko, hear me out for a sec, will you? I understand perfectly why you don't want to use that power, believe me I do. I can't govern how you should live your life or what decisions you should make, but at the very least I think you should learn how to control it, so that you don't lose control." He felt the rook tighten up against him slightly, prompting him to release a sigh. "Look, that dark-natured power I have, the one you saw me use against Varley, it's a very dangerous power. At first, I had no control over it. I was always at risk of having it overpower me and forcing me to go into a berserker mode, where I became an indiscriminate threat to everyone, including my friends. I even ended up impaling one of them through the gut when he tried to stop me from mutilating a defeated enemy. Actively trying to suppress it only did so much, and it was very easy to slip up and lose control. The only choice I had left was to learn to control it, so that I could keep it tamed and under wraps. Eventually, I managed to learn how to HRNSS and use it. Even now, I'm afraid of losing control, Koneko." She relaxed a little in his hold. "You're strong, Nii-san, to do something like that." I'm not as brave as you though. Yes you are, Ichigo refuted. You just need to overcome your fear of senjutsu itself. Power itself isn't evil, that's determined by how it's used. You care for your friends and you don't want to hurt them, that's more than enough reason for you to learn how to control your senjutsu abilities at the very least. I accept you for who you are, as you are. I'm pretty sure everyone else in our house and the rest of the peerage does too. Now, you need to learn how to accept yourself. Gently, he ended the embrace and laid her down on the mattress. Whatever you decide in the end, you'll always have my support, and you'll always have a home at my place, okay? Looking up at him in a mix of awe and gratitude, the snow-haired rook gave him a small nod. Good, now get some rest. You won't be able to prepare for the rating game if you burn yourself out. As he was stepping back, she took hold of his hand. Thank you, Nii-san. An affectionate smile graced his features. Anytime. Without any further words between the pair, he turned around and left the room. Akino was already gone. She had probably walked away sometime near the beginning, to provide the two with some more privacy. Closing the door, Ichigo made his way in the direction of his own quarters. Fragment Dimension, Entrance. Ichigo, Kuro, Nina, and Shadow stepped out of the swirling air, once again inside the spatial distortion that was actually the fragment. However, something felt off to the orange-haired protector. As had now become usual, there was a sensation that something was observing or sensing them, but this time it was more intense and actually felt hostile. In an unnerving way, it reminded him of Kenpachi Saraki's spiritual pressure. Focusing on the intent, he found that it seemed to be spilling out from the large lake of translucent scarlet liquid on their right. He recalled the warning that Zeoticus Gremory had given him long ago that the staff felt as though something was growing within the lake. Guys, keep your guard up, he cautioned. Especially when we're passing the lake. You felt it too then, asked Nina. Yeah. Their vigilance was well-founded, for the moment they drew near the body of liquid, something colossal burst out from its depths. Ignoring the light drizzle of moisture that rained down on them, Ichigo examined the massive creature whilst it was roaring up at the sky, his eyes widening as they took in its details. It had the overall body type of a serpent, long, lean and muscular. The majority of its form was covered in pitch-black scales that looked like armor plating, save for the underbelly, which was a shimmering cerulean. A line of obsidian spines ran down its back. The head appeared vaguely draconic with sharp edges, yet looked fairly smooth in terms of texture. The medium-sized snout had a wide jaw rimmed with pearl-colored fangs. On both sides of the back of its head were 3 large horns with a gill-like web between them. Finally, it possessed 4 oval-shaped, fully crimson eyes that were glaring at the group. DMN, that thing's practically a leviathan, Ichigo expressed in awe. Even though it was an enemy, he couldn't deny the powerful presence that the sea serpent gave off, along with its impressive appearance. Kuro let out a mmmmm. Man, that thing's gonna be a pain to put down. Just look at it, it practically screams danger and badass. Look out! Nina shouted as the Leviathan opened its maw at them, blasting out a jet of highly pressurized red liquid. Each of them dived out of the way, letting the stream blow a crater into the ground where they were only moments ago. The titanic beast roared, as though issuing a challenge. Swiftly equipping his shock burner, Ichigo shot a bolt of lightning at it. Not feeling the least bit threatened, it took the attack directly. The electricity arced around its body for a second or two before dispersing, without having dealt any damage. The Leviathan lunged in Ichigo's direction, mouth primed to skewer him. The teenage substitute quickly flash-stepped out of the way and into the air. Kuro gathered a flame-like black energy in his free hand and threw it at their enemy, but like Ichigo's attempt it was simply shrugged off. The monster's head began speeding towards the fragment, who was next to Nina. Reacting quickly, the dark navy-haired girl generated a large ice shield in the rough shape of a 5-petal flower. However, it immediately shattered upon contact, sending shards of ice flying along with the twin fragments when the serpent rammed into them. Balance breaker! Inferno bolt! Ichigo bellowed. He hurled an explosive orb of ebony flame at the large entity, successfully batting it away from his friends, albeit only by a small distance. He started charging up a Getsuga Tensho as the Leviathan set its sights on him again. Deciding to test out one of the ideas he'd had for a while now, Ichigo tried to incorporate the lightning into his Zanpakuto alongside the Getsuga energy. Red electricity crackled around the blue-shrouded blade. Their enemy was rapidly approaching his position. He swung down and released the modified version of his usual technique. Reiga Tensho! A crescent wave of barely visible blue energy shot forth, covered in furious red lightning. Upon colliding with the Leviathan, it succeeded in knocking it off course and damaging it. On the downside, it seemed more angry than hurt. It retaliated by unleashing another jet of water at the airborne teenager. Surrounding himself in black fire and making a shield of it in front of himself, Ichigo held up Zangetsu to block the fast projectile. The sound of steam rang out as half of the liquid evaporated, but the rest of it carried on unhindered, slamming into Ichigo's weapon. It hit with enough force to break his block and knock the teen out of the air. Fortunately, he was able to right himself and land safely on the ground. Nina created a large boulder of ice above their opponent's head and dropped it. It only forced the massive creature to dip slightly while shattering from the impact. The aquatic beast swung its upper body into her like a club, smacking her away. She rolled across the floor haphazardly until Shadow leaped in and caught her. Her eyes widened when she saw another jet of water speeding towards them. She hastily formed an ice shield to cover them, constantly thickening and strengthening it. The construct splintered and cracked when the fast-moving stream crashed into it, but it held. However, the Leviathan kept the attack going, more liquid rushing out of its throat every second. Futile as it was, Kuro threw another blast of dark energy at it. Seeing the shield about to break, Ichigo thought fast. Bankai, the orange-haired Soul Reaper, declared loudly. His form was obscured by the red outlined black energy, which he immediately shot out of. He charged up another Getsuga, this time channeling his Inferno Bolt's black fire into it as well, giving the forming attack an even more flame-like appearance. Within a second, he reached the Leviathan's head and swung his sword into the side of it, pushing it away slightly. Kenga Tensho! The arc of black Getsuga energy laced with matching flames exploded multiple times in rapid succession when it slammed into its target scales, knocking it away a considerable distance. He was just in time too, as Nina's shield shattered completely a second later. Guys, get back, he commanded. I'm going to take this thing on at even more power, I don't want you caught in the crossfire. His tone was firm and brokered no room for argument. The others carefully retreated to a safe distance near the entrance, whilst the Leviathan recovered and fixed Ichigo with a positively murderous glare. Ichigo responded by sending it a scowl of his own. Reaching up to his face with his left hand, the teen dragged it down, summoning his hollow mask. Before the colossal monster could launch another attack, Ichigo sped forward and blitzed it with a flurry of high-speed strikes. He rapidly moved around, constantly hitting it in a different place each time, smacking its armored body away with each swing. Tired of being knocked around, the Leviathan swung itself in a spiral, forcing Ichigo to end his assault and move back. As if synchronized with one another, both sides released their next attack at the same time. The serpent let out a continuous jet of liquid while the teenager blasted a continuous stream of black fire. A copious amount of steam billowed around the surrounding area as both techniques carried on negating the opposing one. Keeping the flames going, Ichigo raised Tensor Zangetsu above his head, Getsuga energy and red lightning gathering around the blade. With a loud shout, he threw another Reiga Tensho at the Leviathan's head, disrupting its attack. The enraged beast roared prior to leaping out of the lake, staying airborne via long wing of fin hybrids on either side of its central mass. Its tail ended in a large trident shape. It stared down Ichigo, who was observing it calmly. The Leviathan charged at him, cutting through the air like a bullet while dipping down slightly. Ichigo blocked the sharp spines along its back using his Bankai, sparks flying from the saw-like motion of his enemy. While he was still fending off the spines, the Leviathan looped its upper body back around, aiming to bite into the teen substitute. Perceiving the incoming threat, Ichigo generated a cloak of electricity around himself, forcing the flying serpent away. Seeing an opportunity, he rushed forth whilst charging up the lighting around his left gauntlet. Ryu, he shouted upon punching it. An intense barrage of powerful lightning bursts exploded against the Leviathan's body, making it shriek out in pain. Not letting up, he dismissed his Zanpakuto and coated all 4 limbs in electricity before setting to waylaying into the beast with a fast and furious combo of hits. His arms and legs were a blur as drew upon the enhanced speed of his Bankai. Pushing through the pain, the massive sea serpent threw its head at Ichigo, jaws open wide. Fortunately, he was able to quickly prevent becoming its food by using his armored hands and legs to keep the mouth propped open, pushing against the gums near the base of the teeth. Not that he was complaining, but there was no smell coming from the creature's gullet, not of rotting fish anyway. It probably had something to do with how his opponent had been created by the fragment and thus hadn't actually hunted and devoured anything. The teen's eyes widened in alarm as a jet of translucent scarlet liquid shot out of the Leviathan's throat, crashing into him almost instantly. A large cloud of SDTE was sent hurtling through the air for a good few meters before stabilizing himself. The front portions of his Shihakusho's torso were shredded and open, revealing his angry red and raw skin underneath. Thankfully, Ichigo had been able to lessen the damage and prevent the pressurized attack from tearing into his flesh by hastily condensing and coating his spiritual power over it as well as summoning a small barrier of Suzaku fire. DMN, that stings. He winced a bit as the burning sensation faded. Looking forward, he saw that the Leviathan was already flying towards him for another attack. The spiky-haired Soul Reaper rushed forth to meet it midway, summoning Tensor Zangetsu to his hand. The Leviathan swerved, sending its deadly spines at him. He deflected them using his black sword, then tried to launch a pyroelectric orb at the creature, however it twisted out of the way and evaded it. Both moved apart and faced the other. A purple energy began gathering at the Leviathan's gaping mouth, forming a sphere that steadily grew larger. "King, counter it with a Sero," his inner hollow commanded. Following the advice, Ichigo held out his left hand, causing 3 spiraling rays of crimson to converge at his open palm. The 2 sides released their respective beam techniques at the same time, resulting in them meeting in the middle. Each struggled to overcome the other for a few moments before an explosion occurred. Not waiting for the ambient energy to clear up, Ichigo charged through in his foe's direction, raising his Zanpakuto. Catching the Leviathan off guard, he delivered a fierce downward slash, followed by slamming a kick into it using both feet, augmenting the strike with his twin elements. However, he failed to notice the rear end of the Leviathan's mass coming towards him as the monster fell, resulting in him getting smacked by the trident-shaped tail. The sharp edges cut into him and drew BLD, eliciting a cry of pain. Both combatants dropped from the sky and splashed into the lake below. Spluttering, Ichigo surfaced, followed soon after by his opponent breaking the surface with a loud roar. The translucent liquid started to whirl around, the Leviathan at the epicenter. Successfully rising into the air, Ichigo managed to avoid getting sucked in. He flew up high, dodging a blast of water shot after him. Turning to fully face the half-submerged Leviathan, he saw it climbing into the sky to pursue him. He took a second to prepare prior to flash-stepping. He reappeared just above the creature's head, in between where its eyes were, black Getsuga energy coating his Bankai. He swiftly stabbed his sword into it, focusing his power to sharpen the blade and pierce through the thick scales. The Leviathan shrieked and thrashed around in a bid to shake him off, but he held on firmly, even shocking it using his greaves to send the lightning. Getsuga energy began surging around and off his Zanpakuto. Getsuga? The gathering energy grew even more intense, as did the Leviathan's flailing. Tensho! A large quantity of the red outlined energy washed over the monster in addition to bursting out from inside it, completely covering it from view within a matter of seconds. After the technique dispersed, the fragment saw the Leviathan screech briefly prior to disintegrating into black mist, leaving behind a glowing scarlet orb, almost identical to the purple one obtained from the zombie dragon. The teenage substitute caught the item with his free hand, then gently floated down to his friends. He dismissed his hollow mask and Bankai during his descent, letting out a tired sigh upon touching down. "You okay, man?" asked Kuro upon approaching him, looking at his singed chest and multiple lacerations with concern. "Yeah, I'm fine," Ichigo assured. "This shouldn't take too long to heal." "Still, we should head back for today to let you rest up," said Nina. "We can face whatever's after that door in the castle after you've recovered and gone back to optimum condition. I know you're tougher than the rest of us, but I'd rather not take any chances." "All right, let's head back then," Ichigo agreed. "You guys should try to get some training done too so that you're ready to take on whatever jumps out at us." Kuro picked up Shadow, now back in its pet form. "Will do, boss. Let's just get you patched up first." Without any further delay, the group of housemates turned and retreated to the distortion's entrance, passing through the shifting air. "Oh, make!" Ichigo and Dante cut down the last of the reptilian demons that had attacked them, blades according to what Dante informed them. The group were in an open area outside a large coliseum. As it turns out, both Soul Reaper and Son of Sparda had bonded quite quickly with each other. Both were skilled swordsmen, possessed enhanced durability and strength, hunted monsters that threatened innocence, and had a dark side which they could HRNSS the power of Ichigo's hollow powers and Dante's demonic powers respectively. Another point they quickly bonded over was how both had tragically lost their mother at a young age. Despite their very different personalities, they held quite a few common traits, namely their want to help those who needed it and their longing to have the strength to protect that which was dear them. "Man, Mundus must have a lot of free time to create all these demons for us," Dante remarked, returning a laster to his back. "Seriously, if he's gonna go through all that trouble, why not make her a appealing woman or something?" Elsewhere, Trish sneezed for what seemed to be no apparent reason. "You do realize that they'd still try to kill you, right?" Ichigo questioned. "Fair point," Dante conceded. "Still, I for one would appreciate it." "I'm sure you would too, even if you don't admit it." Ichigo facepalmed. "At least he's not as bad as Kon or Issei." Nina put her hand on her hips in annoyance. "You keep acting like that, Dante, you'll probably get slapped by any female you come across, demon or not." In the main entrance hall, Mundus remained as he was in his statue form. However, he had eavesdropped on the demon hunter and his unexpected associates. He began to contemplate whether or not to actually carry out what Dante had remarked. Perhaps making female demons, similar to Trish, could work. They could possibly catch Dante and the other males off guard, especially the latter since they were teenagers. However, he couldn't make them entirely humanoid like Trish, that would be too suspicious and they would be poorly equipped to kill Sparda's spawn and his friends. A hybrid of sorts then perhaps. But then there was the issue of their behavior. He couldn't make them act like the demons already made and present on the island, otherwise they'd be cut down the moment they charged in. Maybe he could remedy that by granting them a certain degree of intelligence, so that they could plan and think for themselves. Yes, that could work. Outside the Colosseum, the area outside where Ifrit was located. The group had just exited the room where Dante had acquired a new devil arm, the Hellflame gauntlets called Ifrit. Suddenly, they sensed multiple demonic presences nearby. What they weren't expecting, though, was for a group of 3 humanoid beings to appear. They were around average height, more or less matching Nina, and had a definitely feminine and lean body type. Their features looked mostly human, save for the arms and legs lightly covered in green and earth-colored scales. They also sported lizard-like tails and yellow eyes with fairly wide vertical pupils. "Well, DMN," Dante whistled as he approached them in a seemingly careless manner. "I didn't think that Mundus would actually make a bunch of hot female demons. Or were they here from before? Ah, who cares?" The new demon slowly drew closer and circled the group, though they seemed to be looking at them in curiosity rather than hostility. "Dude, don't just walk into them like that," Ichigo reprimanded, taking a hold of Zangetsu's hilt just in case. Dante just waved him off. He cupped his chin thoughtfully whilst examining one of the demons that was in front of him. Not bad. Gotta hand it to that crazy guy, he definitely know how to make them good. Besides the scales, you're actually quite the looker, but they have their own charm too." "Seriously?" Get your priorities straight, damn it. Ichigo yelled, cautiously watching one that came up to him. It was strange, but he didn't actually feel threatened by her. Leave him alone, Ichigo, Nina consoled from next to him, also watching the female human lizard demon warily as it seemed to inspect the orange-haired teen. A smack suddenly resounded, leading to them seeing Dante with a red handprint on his face when they turned their heads to look. It seemed that he had offended the female demon in front of him, if the angry and somewhat disgusted scowl was anything to go by. Kuro outright laughed at the silver-haired man's misfortune whilst Nina giggled. Told you you'd end up getting smacked. The demon hunter glared at her, but opted to stay silent and step away from the female demon. The one inspecting Ichigo drew even nearer to him, until she was right in front of him, examining his face curiously. He tensed in preparation, despite still feeling no hostility. The reptilian female suddenly squealed joyfully before unexpectedly tackling Ichigo to the ground. The others quickly got ready to attack, but stopped themselves when they saw that their friend was in no real danger. Instead of trying to harm him, the female demon was happily cuddling him and nuzzling one of her cheeks against his, much to the teen's embarrassment. A bright red blush was on his face as she continued without any signs of stopping soon. The two approached them inquisitively. They inspected Ichigo for a few seconds before they also squealed and grabbed one of his arms each, nuzzling against him too, much to his chagrin. Wow, remarked Kuro. I know that Ichigo's popular at school and all, but this is just something else. Dante was muttering under his breath, something about stupid kids, and a lucky brat. Nina smirked at the man in the red trench coat. And that's how you do it. Take notes, Dante, they could come in handy. The man grumbled irritably in response. Guys? A little help, please? Ichigo pleaded. With Mundus. The demon felt like slapping his palm against his forehead. This was not how he'd intended for things to go. Chapter 27. Q Kuroka. Ichigo gave a loud battle cry as he bifurcated yet another shade that the dimensional fragment had sent to assault them. After recovering from the previous day's battle with the Leviathan, Ichigo led the others back into the spatial distortion. They made haste to the castle, ignoring or quickly dispatching of any shade sent their way. They were now in the room with the locked obsidian door, the one half covered with grotesque tendrils. After dealing with the last of the shades in the current swarm, the spiker-haired teenager approached the door barring their way. Holding the orb gained after defeating the Leviathan, he slotted it into the niche. A soft click was heard, followed soon after by a low rumbling as the two halves of the door moved away from each other and receded into the fleshy mass at the edge. From what they could see of the area ahead, it was even more repulsive than the room they were currently in, completely covered in disturbingly pulsing flesh. The slight, regular movements almost made it seem like it was breathing. Well, we can't really fall short now, stated Ichigo, keeping a firm hold on Zangetsu. Come on guys, last stretch. Best keep our wits about us, said Kuro. That looks like the inside of some monster. We don't know what this fragment might throw at us in there. Nina nodded and hummed in agreement. Well, at least it looks like we're getting closer to the fragment's core. Shadow moved to the back of the group in preparation. The friends dashed forth, speeding along the disgusting corridor. The flesh-like floor squelched beneath their feet, but thankfully bounced back instead of sucking them in. Placed every so often were spindly tendrils that lashed out at them whenever they got close. Ichigo swiftly cut through them with his Zanpakuto as he charged on. After a few minutes, they reached an area which had a harder floor, but still retained a fleshy appearance. It looked like a large chamber with a stone circle in the center, one large enough to hold a group of 10 people within it. The walls surrounding them were dark red, almost black, with multiple skeletons engraved into them. Before any of them could do anything, a sickening sound akin to wet flesh began sounding throughout the chamber. It was followed by 5 violently writhing masses of biomass pushing up from the floor and growing rapidly until they were the height of an average adult human male. The bubbling outer amalgamation fell away in chunks, revealing gruesome beings with forearms ending in clawed fingers, salivating maws lined with oversized fangs, and no skin over their bloody musculature. Ichigo, Kuro, Nina, and Shadow prepared themselves as the new monsters screeched as one prior to leaping at them. Channeling lightning through his blade, Ichigo stabbed one of them through the torso whilst it was still in mid-pounce. He surged the plasma through his skewered foe, quickly killing and charcoaling it. Kuro lunged at the one heading towards him, delivering a swift punch to its face before savagely splitting its body from the head down. Nina generated a large claw of ice and made it slash at the airborne enemy, knocking down before she gripped a long, thin icicle and drove it into the creature's chest. She created another and stabbed it into the head. Shadow grabbed the one that jumped towards it by its throat. The dark fragment gutted its opponent using its free claw and slashed upwards, promptly ending it. It then dashed to the remaining creature and smacked it to the floor. Wasting no time, Shadow set to slashing it apart into a bloody mess to join its slain kin. Once they were done, the group moved over to the stone circle. It shook briefly, then started to sink lower into the ground, taking them through a stone tunnel into another, much larger chamber. This one was composed entirely of a dark grey stone. Awaiting them in the middle of the chamber was a gigantic beast with a pitch-black hide pulled over rippling, powerful muscles. Its figure was 20 meters tall and roughly humanoid. A tuft of blood-stained fur circled its collar. Without warning, a high-pitched, shrill sound began ringing throughout the chamber as a BLD red orb generated at the monster's mouth. Thinking fast, Ichigo started charging up a Getsuga Tensho to counter it. Both sides released their energy-based attacks at the same time. The opposing moves struggled against one another before cancelling out in a large explosion that rocked the chamber. "Guys! Is that thing the main body?" Ichigo inquired, keeping his sight focused on their opponent. "I think so," replied Nina. "I can feel the fragment signature strongest from it, but it still seems off somehow." "Maybe there's a core inside of it," suggested Kuro, readying Diablo. "We'll have to tear it open and destroy the core." Ichigo gripped Zangetsu whilst channeling lightning through it. "Leave it to me." The orange-haired protector flash-stepped over to the large foe and stabbed forward with his Zanpakuto. The main body blocked the attack with one of its arms, the thick hide around it unyielding, but was still shocked by the Byakko lightning of the shock burner. Capitalizing on the main body's stunned state, Ichigo removed one hand from his primary weapon's hilt. He hurled an explosive fireball at his enemy's chest. It roared loudly when the ball of fire impacted against it, then swatted Ichigo away. As the teenage Soul Reaper rolled away across the ground, his friends jumped in to pick up on his assault. Kuro threw a blast of dark energy with his free hand. Although it did little damage upon hitting the main body, he used the resulting distraction to quickly attempt to stab before leaping back to a safe distance. Nina followed up by creating a trio of large icicles above its head and dropped them. When the main body swung its arms to smash them away, she took the opportunity to try freezing its feet in place. Unfortunately, the large being was able to immediately free itself and stomped its foot down, causing a shockwave that knocked Nina to the ground. Shadow avoided the shockwave by leaping forward and grabbing onto the main body. The smaller fragment maintained its grip via its claws, even though they couldn't penetrate the main body's skin. The main body swiped at Shadow, who dodged by leaping towards another area of its body and securing its grip there. Seeing that their opponent was distracted, Ichigo lunged forth, dismissing his Zanpakuto and charging up intense lightning around his right fist. "Ryu," he shouted upon smashing his fist into the main body's leg. He directed the following thunderstorm of electric bursts to manifest and detonate against the main body. While the enemy creature was getting electrocuted, he leaped up towards its torso, a fierce amalgamation of flames swirling around his left gauntlet. Homura! The searing blast of fire was concentrated on the main body's chest, where the heart would be on a normal person. The friends watched as the thick hide began to darken and disintegrate, a scarlet-red glow starting to shine through from underneath. Soon, a pulsing crystalline orb was revealed, but before Ichigo could even land a hit he was punched out of the air and to the wall of the chamber. The main body started charging up its Zero-like attack once again, the shrill sound ringing through the air. What's more, the destroyed skin began steadily regenerating to cover the core again. Shadow quickly traversed over to the main body's back. Thinking fast, Kuro and Nina launched a dark orb and blast of ice respectively towards the forming orb. Their efforts successfully destabilized the attack and caused it to blow up prematurely in the main body's face. Slightly disorientated, the main body took a few steps back. There was a loud call of Getsuga Tensho, followed soon after by a crescent wave of blue energy slamming into it and pushing it back further. Ichigo landed in front of his two fragment friends. With a command of Bankai, black energy with a red outline swirled up around him, briefly obscuring him from view. Shadow kicked off from the main body's back, pouncing onto its head and clung on stubbornly despite the large foe's attempts to shake it off. Shadow plunged the claws on either of its hands into the main body's eyes, making it scream loudly in a concoction of pain and fury. Wielding Tensor Zangetsu, Ichigo dashed ahead and sent a nameless Getsuga against it just as Shadow leaped off and away. The main body fell to the floor. Ichigo summoned his hollow mask and flash-stepped over to above the downed enemy. For tendrils of black Getsuga energy swirled out and around the black Bankai. Getsuga? Tensho, the orange-haired teen shouted, launching a massive wave into the main body. When the energy dispersed, the core was once again exposed and the main body was still lying down. Now, attack the core! Not needing to be told twice, the rest of them ran forward. Kuro jumped and flipped his sword into a reverse grip. Holding it with both hands, he stabbed the blade down into the crystalline core. The main body tried to smack him away with one of its arms, but Ichigo countered it with a quick nameless Getsuga and kept it away. Kuro yanked his weapon out of the core and shot a dark energy blast into the cracks prior to hopping back. Nina leaped up and generated a large stake. She drove it into the same area that Kuro had stabbed, eliciting a roar of agony from the main body. Landing on the core, she formed an ice sword in each hand and stabbed down into it, using them as conduits for send a wave of ice down into the core. A thin layer of frost formed on the large being's body. Satisfied, the female fragment jumped off. Now that the coast was clear, Ichigo dismissed his ebony weapon. He hastily formed a large spear of flames in one hand and an equally sized spear of lightning in the other. He smashed both constructs together and merged them. Without wasting any more time, he flew down and drove it into the already damaged core whilst releasing a loud war cry. The teenage war hero struggled for a moment before putting more strength into his efforts, forcing his oversized spear deeper into the core. He was abruptly halted by the main body grabbing him and hurling him away. Recovering in mid-air, Ichigo smirked as he touched down. "You're finished," he declared, summoning his Bankai Zanpakuto to his hand and pointing it towards the main body. He detonated the still impaled spear, shattering the core and bursting the main body from the inside out. The friends breathed a collective sigh of relief. However, it didn't last for long. Within seconds, the entire area began shaking violently. "OCRP," exclaimed Kuro as he tried to keep his balance. "The distortion's destabilizing, we need to get out ASAP." Outside the spatial distortion. Lord Gremory was standing outside the swirling air that was the entrance to the fragment's dimension. Suddenly, the ripples became much more erratic and violent. He cautiously took a step back. Moments later, Ichigo, Kuro, Nina and Shadow came rushing out of the distorted space. The group bent over to regain their breath, slowly moving away from the entrance warily. After a minute or so, the air twisted in on itself before imploding into nothingness. Straightening back up, Ichigo sent Xeoticus a small grin. "Lord Gremory, I believe that your problem has been successfully dealt with." "You have my sincere thanks," replied the redhead with a smile of his own. "I hope that I can compensate you for your troubles." "No need," Ichigo quickly refuted. "Really, I have more than enough money to last me and my housemates. You don't need to pay us." "Very well," the devil conceded. "In that case, how about a favor instead? If you find yourself in need of any assistance, simply contact me and I'll see what I can do to help." "All right, I can agree to that," Ichigo accepted. "Will you be staying with us here or returning home?" "Home. It's been a while since we were last there." "Understood. I'll arrange some transport for all of you." Ichigo's house, day before the young devil's party. Ichigo and his housemates were relaxing in the living room. Nina was reading a book whilst absent-mindedly petting Shadow. Ichigo was playing Final Fantasy XV and Kuro was watching him. The doorbell suddenly rang. "I'll get it," said Ichigo, pausing the game and getting up. Upon opening the front door, he saw Slycer smiling at him cheerfully. "Hello there, Ichigo-kun," the redhead super devil greeted warmly. "Are you free?" "Hi, Slycer." "Yeah, I am. Why?" "Well, tomorrow evening is the party for the young devils before the first rating game, between Rias and Sona," explained Slycer. "Since you're quite strong in your own right, as well as someone I trust, I was wondering if maybe you would like to come along as a guard?" An expression of surprise briefly flashed across Ichigo's countenance. "Wow. Thanks for trusting me with something like that. I wouldn't really mind, but I'm afraid that I'll end up bored out of my mind." Slycer gave a small chuckle. "Don't worry. You won't need to be a serious guard, it's more of a formality really. You can be free to socialize with whoever you wish, just try to keep aware of anything suspicious though. It's been quite a while since my sister and her peerage saw you, so I'm sure they'd appreciate it too." "All right, I'll be there." "Wonderful. I'll send Grayfear to pick you up tomorrow." Next day, Underworld, Young Devil's Party Hall. Ichigo stood near one of the doors, scanning over the various youths. He was garbed in his. Rias and the rest of her peerage had met him already, happy to see him. Koneko had hugged him and he was glad to see that she no longer looked overworked. Earlier, he saw Ravel Phoenix speaking with Issei and handing him something. A few teenage girls had winked and giggled at the teen Soul Reaper. Some of them gained heavy blushes or squealed when he played along and sent a small smile back. He suddenly noticed Koneko looking rather stiff and somewhat afraid. The petite rook looked around uneasily before making her way towards one of the other exits. Frowning in concern, the spiky-haired substitute quietly followed her. He was soon joined by Issei and Rias, who had also noticed Koneko's unusual behavior. They followed her outside, into the trees nearby. They hung back and hid behind two different trees as they observed the white-haired girl step into a small clearing. "Shironi, it's so good to see you again," said a mysterious voice. Soon after, a black-haired Nekomata with hazel eyes the same as Koenko's, two black tails and a voluptuous body appeared a small distance ahead of her. "It's been such a long time." Koneko swallowed nervously. "Kuroka-ne-san." Ichigo sent an inquisitive look to Rias and Issei. Rias looked a mix of shocked and fearful, but pressed her finger to her lips for them to remain silent. The two Nekishu siblings conversed, mostly revolving around how Kuroka had come to take Koneko, or Shironi, back with her, by force if necessary. "Oi, come out from hiding," Kuroka demanded suddenly. "I could sense you hiding back there from the beginning. Your presence isn't concealed at all." Ichigo signaled for Rias and Issei to go forth when they looked at him. The orange-haired teen opted to stay back. However, when the two devils stepped into view, Kuroka gained a look of visible surprise. "What? Where did the two of you come from? I couldn't sense you at all." Releasing a sigh, Ichigo stepped out into the clearing. "Yeah, that's probably my fault," he announced, grabbing everyone's attention. "I possess more power than what my body can consciously contain, so it's always leaking out. It wouldn't be the first time that it's interfered with someone's sensory capabilities." "Seriously?" asked Kuroka in shock and awe. A predatory glint briefly flashed through her eyes as she regarded Ichigo, sending a shiver down his spine with a hungry look. Thankfully, it quickly passed before anyone else could notice it. "Well, that doesn't matter right now. I'm taking Shironi back with me, and I'm not going to let any of you get in my way." "Sorry, but I can't let you do that," Ichigo refuted seriously, gripping Zangetsu's hilt. "Koneko happens to be someone precious to me, so there's no way I'll let you force her into something that she doesn't want to do." "I'm her elder sister," Kuroka remarked with a slight hiss. "She should be with me, not with you lot." A strange mist spread out towards them. Rias and Koneko fell to the ground, gasping and spluttering. "What did you just do?" Ichigo roared, unsheathing his weapon and pointing it towards the black-haired girl. He felt a tingling sensation through his body. His inner hollow told him that there was something fishy about that mist, but he was taking care of it for him. "It's a special poisonous mist made through senjutsu," Kuroka answered. "It quickly affects devils and yokai. Seems like dragons are immune though." She stared at Ichigo. "What are you though? You don't seem to be affected." "I'm a human," Ichigo replied angrily. "What kind of messed up elder sibling poisons their younger sister in it?" "Shut up!" Kuroka snapped. "What do you know? I'm doing this for her own sake." "I know enough." Ichigo countered just as fiercely, if not more so. "And I know that an elder sibling should never harm their younger ones. If you're willing to do something like this to her, I'll never let you take her." His spiritual pressure began flooding out in accordance to his rage, pressing down on Kuroka with escalating force. "Nei-san, please stop," Koneko sobbed. "I don't want to go with you. I don't want to leave everyone here. I want to stay with Rias Bucho and everyone else in the peerage. I want to stay with everyone else at our house. I want to stay with Ichigo Nei-san. I'm not Shironi, I'm Koneko Tujo." Kuroka grit her teeth in anger, despite finding it difficult to move with Ichigo's pressure weighing down on her. Without warning, something snarled and rammed into Ichigo, pulling him away from everyone else and up into the air. He felt something trying to pierce his body, so he hardened his spiritual power over his skin. The mystery assailant threw him away from itself. Righting himself in midair, the teenage Soul Reaper took a good look at it. It was another fragment, one that looked slender and serpentine. It had 2 arms ending in forefinger with oversized claws. A line of spines ran along its back, ending in a blade at the tip of its tail. There were now visible eyes on the face, only a wide jaw lined with short but sharp teeth. The fragment screeched at him, splaying its claws out. Ichigo scoffed in annoyance and readied his sword. It looked like he'd have to trust the Kuroka situation to Issei. Back with the others. Issei had summoned his boosted gear, but it didn't act like usual. He recalled how Tanin had told him that he was close to achieving his balance breaker, and would have already done so if it were the standard scale male. The fact that Issei had developed a subspecies complicated things as was the reason why he didn't already have it. Speaking of Tanin, the dragon had showed up earlier and was currently dueling Biko, leaving Issei to deal with Kuroka by himself. All he was doing at the moment though, was shielding Rias and Koneko from the stray senjutsu blasts using his body. DMN it. Why am I so useless, he thought in frustration. Why can't I protect anyone that I care about? Partner, you need a push to get your balance breaker, Drake told him through their link. You're at a disadvantage right now because the boosted gear can't decide whether to go for the normal boost function or try activating your scale buster. You need a psychological push to break the indecision and get balance breaker, especially since I don't know when the next opportunity will arise. Easier said than done, Drake. Issei responded mentally. Wait, a strong psychological push? I think I know what I need. With Ichigo. The orange-haired Soul Reaper dashed through the air to avoid another swipe, then tried to counter with a slash. Unfortunately, his opponent twisted its body to evade. The fragment lunged forth and attempted to bite him. He grabbed it with the armor of his sacred gear and threw it away. In the corner of his peripheral vision, he saw Tanin facing off against Biko, but was unable to assist the dragon, not that it seemed like he actually needed it. Countering the fragment by punching its head and grabbing one of its wrists, he managed to hack one of its arms off. The creature shrieked and quickly withdrew a medium distance. What do you think you're doing? Tanin roared suddenly, looking down. Following his gaze, Ichigo saw Issei. The brown-haired pawn was doing something rather questionable, making Ichigo seriously contemplate going down there just to beat the CRP out of him. On the bright side, Kuroka was also dumbfounded by his actions and thus had dropped her offense. He flash-stepped away to avoid the fragment's tail as it raced towards him like a spear. Clearing his mind of all distractions, Ichigo focused on his opponent. He waited for the monster to speed towards him again. At the last second, he flash-stepped behind it and stabbed Zangetsu into its back. Ignoring the fragment's shrieks and flails, he charged up a Getsuga Tensho and swung his blade, bifurcating his enemy with the technique. Looking back down, he saw Issei clad in his subspecies balance breaker armor, standing in front of a still Kuroka with his fist inches from her face. He flash-stepped down to behind the black-haired Nekishu, holding his free hand covered in a coating of pyro-electricity to her neck. "Like Issei just told you," said Ichigo coldly. "Get lost and don't come back. Next time, elder sister or not, neither of us will hold back against you." Kuroka gulped before snarling in equal parts irritation and anger. "Biko, we're leaving." The monkey yokai touched down next to her, smoking slightly. "All right, let's get out of here." The two Chaos Brigade members vanished without any further ado. Ichigo exhaled deeply and sheathed his Zanpakuto. Likewise, Issei deactivated his balance breaker. "Congratulations on finally achieving it, Issei," said Ichigo with a friendly pat on the shoulder. He walked over to Koneko and knelt down to her level. He took the girl into a gentle embrace. "No matter what happens, no matter who tries to take you away, I will always do whatever I can to keep you safe," he promised her. "Remember, Koneko, you will always have a home with me." The snow-haired rook sniffed and snuggled against him. "I know, thank you, Nii-san." "Oh, make." Ichigo's inner world. Hollow Ichigo was fiddling with a glowing orb, the one that represented Ichigo's sacred gear. "What are you doing?" asked Zangetsu, atop his flagpole as usual. "Chill out, old man," assured the pale replica. "I'm only trying to get a better understanding of the shock burner so that King can use it better." He continued to examine and tinker with the orb. Suddenly, a strange feeling washed over the inner world. "Oops. I hope that doesn't affect anything too badly." Later, the confrontation with Kuroka. Ichigo had just stepped out into the clearing and explained to Kuroka how his leaking residual power was blocking her sensory abilities. However, the orange-haired Soul Reaper noticed that her face seemed rather flushed and she was breathing quite deeply. "Hey, are you feeling okay?" he couldn't help but ask. There was a small part in the back of his mind that was ringing as though trying to warn him of something. What's going on?" Kuroka panted. "These are the male Nekomata pheromones," she thought in confusion. She looked at Ichigo like she was trying to analyze him. "Are you some kind of Nekomata? Or part Nekomata?" "No," he replied, feeling a little tense for some unknown reason. "But I do have Byakko lightning due to my sacred gear." Ichigo heard a nervous chuckle within his mind. "Sorry, King," his inner hollow apologized. "I think I may have caused a screw-up." Before Ichigo could even question what his bleached copy meant, he found himself suddenly lying down on the ground, Kuroka sitting on top of him and pinning his shoulders. There was a hungry glint in her eyes, something predatory and primal. Her breathing was in ragged pants, sending her heated breaths against his face. A deep red blush was adorning her cheeks and her pupils were like a cat's. "Hey Shironi," Kuroka called without taking her gaze off Ichigo's eyes. "I'll come back for you later, okay? I've got some business to take care of." Before anyone could even say anything in response, the black-haired Nekishu used Senjutsu to teleport both herself and Ichigo away. There was absolute silence for a few moments. "DMN it!" Issei shouted, tears streaming from his scrunched eyes. "Why the hell is Ichigo-senpai so bloody lucky?" "Oh, make two." Ichigo and Dante were stood before Mundus, the king of the demons, himself. The friendly fragments were stood behind them, watching on in slight unease. Only seconds ago, Trish had seemingly given her life to save Dante's and to an extent Ichigo's. Both young men had an intense black and red aura enshrouding them. Mundus stood up, his stone form cracking and falling away from him. There was a bright flash of light, then they were standing in an alternate dimension that looked like space. Dante asked Mundus why he targeted his mother all those years ago. The demon lord gave his arrogant reply, even stating to the two of them that if they wanted a mother, he could easily create one for both, as many as they needed or wanted. That snapped the last straw for Ichigo and Dante. "Silence," declared Dante, his eyes glowing red with demonic power. "Who the hell do you think you are?" Ichigo shouted, his hollow spiritual power surging from his body violently. With a furious shout, both transformed. Dante took upon the appearance of his late father, the legendary demon knight and savior of humanity, Spada. On the other hand, Ichigo's skin turned bone white, his upper clothing shredded away, and a horned skull mask with black markings covered his head. Red tufts of fur were present at his wrists, ankles, and collarbone. He opened his jaws wide and unleashed a loud, dual-tone roar. The two empowered males began charging up respective attacks. A black and red dragon in Spada's image forming in front of Dante, and a Cero Gigante forming at Ichigo's horns. At that moment, as a feeling of inescapable dread rushed through the Demon King, Mundus realized that he had just messed up, big time. It is said that if anyone looked at Mallet Island that day, they would have seen a black and red energy dragon burst through the highest tower of the castle, alongside a massive crimson laser. Chapter 28. Deodora Diabolism. Ichigo's house. Ichigo stepped out of the shower, toweling his hair dry. He had just finished a sparring session against Zangetsu and his inner hollow, taking a quick soak in the hot spring afterwards to heal up his wounds. The rating game between Rias and Sona had taken place the previous day. He was pleasantly surprised to see Koneko use her Nekashu abilities, glad that she had finally accepted that part of herself. He was sure that Issei had played some part in that, so he'd have to thank the perverted pawn when he saw him. From what he'd been told, they were all going to be returning later today. Deciding he'd spent enough time recovering and relaxing, Ichigo stood up and exited the pool. He saw his fragment housemates sparring against one another using their respective abilities. The orange-haired teen walked away towards the exit, planning to fix up a meal. It was just before they all sat down to eat lunch when the doorbell rang. Ichigo went to answer it. Upon opening the door, he was met with the sight of Koneko smiling at him. Happily. "Hello, Nii-san," she greeted with easily detectable warmth. "I'm back." Sending a brotherly smile of his own, Ichigo opened the door fully. "Welcome home, Koneko." After she stepped in and Ichigo had closed the door again, the petite rook hugged him. A second later her cat ears and tail popped out. Letting out a brief chuckle, the war hero gently ruffled her hair affectionately, then lightly rubbed the back of her ear at the base. A content purr left Koneko's mouth as she snuggled against him. "I'm proud of you, Koneko," he told her. "You pushed through despite your fear and finally accepted yourself for who you are." "Thank you, Nii-san," she responded. "For everything. For giving me a sibling again, for letting me stay with you, for comforting me and giving me advice. For helping to protect me from Kuroka Wani-san too. I don't need to keep things to myself anymore, because I'm going to control my power and don't need to be afraid of it. I can freely express myself again." "You're welcome," chuckled Ichigo. "Like I told you before, I'll always be ready to help you, and you'll always have a home here with me. You helped me to get over my loneliness too, so we're even." Nina's voice suddenly came from the dining room. "Ichigo, are you okay?" "Who was at the door?" Kuro's voice followed. "Come on, man, before your food gets cold." Ichigo's mouth formed an amused smirk. He gave one final pat to his pseudo-sister's head. "Come on, let's go eat." The others were all overjoyed to see Koneko again. Each of them welcomed her back, gave her a hug, in Shadow's case got a hug, and praised her on her performance in the rating game. Nina couldn't stop gushing about how cute her cat features were and how adorable they made her look. Kuro said that he was glad for her, and that her new openness was a refreshing trait. Despite not being able to speak, Shadow also showed its support, giving her an approving and encouraging look coupled with a resolute nod. The next few days went on as usual, everyone taking an immediate liking to Koneko's newfound expressiveness. Soon after though, Rias was informed that her next match would be against Deodora Astaroth. That's when things started going a little crazy. As it turned out, Deodora was the very devil who Aisha had been excommunicated for healing. He'd actually come and professed his love for her, in addition to sending a crazy amount of letters and gifts. He'd even proposed trading Aisha into his peerage, but Rias had turned that down without even considering it, stating that Aisha was like a precious younger sister to her. Personally, Ichigo didn't like the guy. He seemed far too shifty and reminded the orange-haired war hero of Aizen. His instincts were practically screaming at him that Deodora couldn't be trusted. He'd warned Rias and the ORC regarding it. Turns out that Issei also found him to be rather shady, though perhaps for slightly different reasons. Ichigo assured Aisha that if she had any problems, related to Deodora or otherwise, she was more than welcome to seek his help. Ichigo's house. It was around a week before the rating game between Rias and Deodora took place. The spiky-haired teen was alone in the living room, playing a video game to pass the time. Koneko was doing her duties as a peerage member. The fragments were taking a walk around town. The doorbell rang, prompting him to pause the game and get up. Opening the front door, he was met by none other than Azazel, a friendly smile on the head-fallen angel's visage. "Hi Ichigo," the man greeted with a playful salute. "You free right now?" The substitute Soul Reaper quirked an eyebrow. "Yeah, I am." "You want to come inside?" "Sure," Azazel accepted. "I need to discuss something sensitive with you anyway." They both went to the living room. Azazel gave his approval upon seeing the game that Ichigo had been playing before taking a seat. "So, what do you need to talk to me about?" Ichigo inquired. The raven-haired man's face turned serious. "We've received solid info that Deodora Astaroth is in fact a member of the Chaos Brigade." Ichigo's scowl deepened. "Continue." "To be more specific, he's a part of the old Satan faction. We believe that he's going to try pulling something during the rating game," Azazel revealed. "We're making preparations for that, and we're wondering if you'd be willing to lend a hand." "Do you really need to ask?" The orange-haired Soul Reaper smirked. "Count me in. That guy rubbed me the wrong way right from the start. He's arrogant as hell too." Azazel smiled. "Wonderful. There's just one more thing I have to request of you. Please don't tell Rias or her peerage anything about this. We can't let Deodora know that we're onto him." Ichigo clicked his tongue in annoyance. "I don't like it, but fine." The faction leader nodded in understanding and thanks. He stood up from his seat. "By the way, we're receiving some help from the Norse faction for this operation. You want to come meet them?" The teen shrugged as he got onto his feet. "Why not? I've got nothing important to do anyway." A happy grin broke out on Azazel's face. Muttering something that sounded like "the old man's gonna love this," he clicked his fingers and created a magic circle. Both males stepped into it and disappeared. Underworld. When Ichigo could see again, they were in a completely different room. One that appeared very high-end and grandiose. He caught sight of Surzex and Grafia, sending the pair a nod in greeting. They responded in kind along with small smiles. "So you're back, Azazel," remarked an elderly voice. Ichigo turned to see an old-looking man with a long grey beard and monocle. Standing next to him was an attractive young girl around his age with long silver and blue eyes. She was dressed in a smart grey tuxedo. "I take it that you were successful?" Azazel smirked and clamped Ichigo's shoulder with his hand. "Old man, meet Ichigo Kurosoki, one of the greatest allies to the alliance of the three factions. Ichigo, meet Odin, leader of the Norse faction. That girl next to him is called Ross Weiss, I think?" The girl in question nodded. "That's right." Odin stepped towards Ichigo, stroking his beard whilst gazing at him analytically. "So you're the one who the leaders wouldn't shut up about, eh? I have to admit, I didn't fully believe them when they told me that you were still just a teenager." Thanks," responded Ichigo in mild confusion. Odin laughed. "There's no need to be so lost or stiff, boy. Just be yourself. I'm not really one for boring procedures and uptight behavior." Still, I have to say it's very impressive that you were able to not only defeat Kokabiel, but the White Dragon Emperor too, and you're a human to boot. Ross Weiss let out a shocked gasp. Is that true? Ichigo nervously scratched the back of his head, a light blush on his face. Well, yeah, but I only did it because they were threatening my home and friends. It was still pretty tough though, especially Varley once he went Juggernaut Drive. I was probably lucky that Issei had tired him out already. He's modest too, Odin observed. A mischievous smirk manifested on his face. Say, Ross Weiss, he seems like pretty good boyfriend material, eh? Ichigo felt the beginning of a headache as his respect for the Norse leader took a drop. Hey! Odin-sama, what are you saying? The silver-haired Valkyrie spluttered, her face a fierce shade of red. It's not appropriate to say such things to someone we've just met. You should apologize. Geez, Odin sighed. It's because you're like this. That you're still single. Ichigo was expecting a few things to happen as a possible outcome. Maybe Ross Weiss would slap her boss or shout at him. Maybe she'd give a miffed glare of severe intensity. He didn't, however, expect for her to suddenly drop to the ground and begin bawling her eyes out. I'm sorry, she wailed, a river of tears cascading from her eyes. I'm just a useless Valkyrie whose age is the same as the number of years I've spent without a boyfriend. Ichigo watched her with a troubled expression. He sent a light glare to the amused Odin. Hey old man, it's not very nice to bully her like that. He walked over to the crying girl and crouched down, patting her shoulder comfortingly. Ross Weiss stared at him in confusion, still sniffing and hiccuping. It can't be that bad, right? I mean, I've never been in a relationship with anyone in my life either, but it's never really bothered me too much. The silver-haired girl looked at him in wide-eyed disbelief. Heck, back in my old school, pretty much nearly all the girls were afraid of me because they wrongly thought that I was a delinquent. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is, don't let it get to you. You seem like a nice enough girl and you're pretty cute too. I'm sure you'll find someone who appreciates you soon enough. A small blush appeared on the young Valkyrie's countenance as she continued looking at Ichigo. The atmosphere was unceremoniously ruined by Odin giving a bellowing laugh. I think you found a keeper, Ross Weiss. You should hurry up while he's still single and available. The poor girl broke out into an incoherent jumble, her face completely crimson. She shot up to her feet, spluttering denials and awkwardly backpedaling a few steps away from the orange-haired teen. Ichigo sighed and gently facepalmed, sending a weary glare to the chuckling Norse leader. In the back, Azazel muttered an awed, smooth to Serzex, who smiled in agreement. Garifia cleared her throat loudly, gaining everyone's attention. I believe that we should start discussing our plans for how to deal with Diodora. There was an undertone of a threat to her words. Odin sighed at the abrupt end to his entertainment, whereas Serzex stiffly nodded. Azazel sighed and agreed. Ichigo's house. It was finally time to launch their plan. Rias and the ORC had already gone for the rating game. Ichigo had let his fragment friends in on the secret a few days previously. The four of them were now waiting to be called and taken. A magic circle bearing the Gremory crest materialized on the floor, followed shortly after by the appearance of Greyfear. It's time, stated the Ultimate Queen. Please join me in the circle. Stealing their nerves, Ichigo, Kuro, Nina, and Shadow stepped into the transportation circle. Dimensional gap. A second later, the group found themselves in an open area with a dark yet iridescent sky. With a small mental jolt, the orange-haired teen recognized it as the dimensional gap. A short distance in front of them was Azazel, speaking to someone through a magic circle. A Chaos Brigade member attempted to strike him, but the Governor General's prosthetic arm fired off like a rocket and punched him in the gut. Azazel's arm reattached and he ended the call. Yo kids, he greeted. Glad you could join us. Turns out that Diodora has kidnapped Aisha and is holding her at his base. Rias and her peerage are on their way to rescue her. Ichigo folded his arms as more Old Satan faction members appeared around them, only to be swiftly put down by Greyfear's powerful magic. So, should I go on ahead to help them like we decided? Azazel sent him a jovial smirk. Go ahead. Have fun and take them out. Not needing any further motivation, the four of them dashed off in the direction where they could sense their friends. A short while later, they reached them. As Azazel had informed, Aisha wasn't among them. A multitude of enemy soldiers were surrounding them both on the ground and in the air. Getsuga Tensho! Ichigo roared, SWNGNG his Zanpakuto in a wide arc and unleashing widespread version of his signature technique. His attack neutralized a fairly large number of hostiles. Upon hearing his voice, the Gremory peerage turned to look at him with a relieved and hopeful glimmer in their eyes. Ichigo! Issei greeted. Azazel told us you'd be coming soon. Thanks for the help. No problem, the teenage Soul Reaper assured, stopping a few paces away from him. Not bad, said an elderly voice as they heard a surprised yelp from Akino. They looked to see an old man with a long grey beard and monocle lifting up the girl's uniform. Ichigo's gaze turned blank as he felt his lingering respect for Oden take a nosedive, internally groaning at the man's perverseness. What the hell do you think you're doing, old man? Issei demanded. Ichigo and the fragments gave him somewhat questioning stares, causing him to groan. Sorry, but it's been a while since I saw such a fine young lady, apologized Oden, though he didn't sound the least bit remorseful. He walked towards the edge. Moving on, Ichigo said, shaking his head. You guys go on ahead, you need to save Aisha. But what about you? Asked Issei in concern. I know you're all strong, but there's loads of enemies here. Ichigo hefted Zangetsu onto his shoulder. Don't worry, we can handle it. Besides, we have Oden here to help us out. I'm pretty sure he's not the leader of the Norse faction for nothing. The old man's true identity shocked their devil friends, while Oden himself gave an amused chuckle. Now go, Issei, Asia's waiting for you to rescue her? Closing his mouth, Issei nodded resolutely, a determined fire appearing in his brown oculus. Yeah. A man protects what's precious to him, right? The spiky-haired substitute smirked. Go and show them why you don't mess with the Red Dragon Emperor. Indeed, Oden concurred. Allow me to deal with these flying pests. He called out loudly to the Chaos Brigade soldiers. Oi, instead of a bunch of kids, why don't you try going for the leader of the Norse, me? I'm sure you'll get much more recognition, not that you'll be able to. The enemies glanced at each other for confirmation. A bunch of them started diving towards Oden. Still smirking, he held out his right hand. Gungnir! The legendary spear materialized from a whirling portal. Oden swung it, releasing a large attack that took out the majority of his incoming assailants. Ha! This old man's not going to be croaking from the likes of you. Without wasting any more time, Issei and the others ran off unhindered. Ichigo took to the skies, firing another Getsuga as he did so. Down below, Kuro had summoned his sword to his hand, clashing against some of the enemy devils. Nina, clad in her sleek black armor, blasted ice at another group. Shadow was in its battle form, dashing between opponents and slashing them as it passed. The foot soldiers didn't stand a chance against them, dropping like flies left and right. A while later, they all felt Akino's magical energy skyrocket, a large pillar of golden magic lightning bursting from her location. A few seconds after that, Ria's energy also exploded, an aura of her power of destruction surging up. The two girls' respective auras continued rising, almost competitively, for the next moment or so. Then, they felt a large attack take out a lot of Diodora's pieces. Why do I feel as though Issei's responsible for this? Ichigo mused. And that it was through a ridiculous method too. With Issei. The brown-haired pawn charged into Diodora's room, shouting out Asia's name upon seeing her. She was trapped against the wall in some kind of organic-looking yet hardened substance, above Diodora's throne. The black-haired devil was observing them arrogantly, a mocking sneer present on his features. The scumbag went on to rant about how all the holy maidens of the world belonged to him, how he was originally going to take Aisha and make her his SLV, but then Issei interfered. He even went as far as claiming that he'd kill Issei and then forcefully have his way with the blonde ex-nun. Issei grit his teeth in rage. The red armor of his subspecies balance breaker manifested around him instantly along with a declaration of Scale Buster in Drake's disembodied voice. Deodora sent a blast of magic towards Issei. The Red Dragon Emperor nonchalantly swatted it away to the side. His eyes widening in surprise and slight fear, Deodora began launching multiple magic attacks at Issei, all of which were angrily knocked away to the side. A wall of green magic shields came between the pawn and Twisted King. "Ha, you'll never be able to break through this magic," Deodora boasted. "A filthy, low-class scum dragon-like doesn't have the power to a powerful spell like this." A small growl came from Issei. A small ball of red energy charged up over his open left palm. "Will you shut up already?" He closed his armored finger over the orb, the magic power shining through the gaps in his fist. "Dragon Smash," he roared furiously, ramming his left fist into the emerald barrier. The shield shattered instantly without any resistance, leaving one Deodora Astaroth slack-jawed and speechless. The vent on Issei's gauntlet suddenly fired out crimson streams of dragon energy, propelling him forward and letting him slam a strong punch into the creep's gut. Deodora hacked up some BLD and was sent crashing into the wall. "How dare you touch me, you filthy dragon!" he screamed madly. "I'll show you. I'll take away that little where you like so much." The substance Aisha was trapped in pulsed and glowed. Issei grabbed Deodora by the throat. "What the hell did you just do?" "Ha ha 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 ha. I've triggered a countdown." Deodora cackled mockingly. "Soon you'll all get to see her explode." Gritting his teeth under the helmet, Issei smashed his fist into Deodora's face and dropped him. The emerald green, ethereal wings of his balance breaker flared out from the vent on his back and he flew up to the captive blonde. "It's okay," Aisha assured gently despite the tears trailing down her face. All the others looked like they were on the verge of crying themselves. "Please don't be sad. I'm glad that I got to meet you and everyone else, that I was able to have such a wonderful life with you." Issei placed an armored hand on the thing restraining her. "No, Aisha. You won't die, I won't let you. You're someone I really care about. That's why I'm going to save you and bring you back home with us. That but down there can go screw himself." Magic energy gathered around his hand. "Dress break." Instantly, the matter surrounding Aisha shredded apart into nothingness, leaving her free. Issei caught her before she could fall and gently floated back down to the others, all of them watching in awed disbelief. The brown-haired teen released his balance breaker and let go of his friend, allowing the rest of the peerage to embrace her, particularly a tearful Zenobia. Once they were done, Aisha said that she wanted to make a quick prayer and thanks. As she sat down and clasped her hands, a golden light surrounded her. A second later, she vanished. Issei's eyes widened as he stepped forward, weakly reaching out to where she had been mere seconds ago. "Aisha," he said in a lost, hollow voice. "Where are you? Come on, we promised to go back home together, didn't we?" Nobody else said anything, feeling too shocked and horrified. With Ichigo, the orange-haired Soul Reaper cut down yet another enemy. Azazel and Rossweiss had come and joined them not too long ago. It seemed like he'd just taken care of the last one. For now anyway. An unexpectedly powerful presence appeared in their midst, one that Ichigo felt was vaguely familiar. "It's been a long time, Odin, Azazel." The young substitute turned his head and caught sight of a certain black-haired girl. "Ophis? What are you doing here?" he questioned, not relinquishing his hold on his sword. The others also went on alert as they observed the dragon. Ophis stared at him with her usual empty expression. "I was told that Great Red would be arriving here soon. I'm also here to see how the old Satan faction's assault will turn out." Ichigo slowly lowered his blade, but maintained caution. "So you're not going to fight?" "No." Suddenly, there was a flash of golden light and Aisha appeared before them. She blinked in confusion before looking around. How did I get here?" she asked, her head slightly tilted. A second later, they all felt Issei's signature turn malicious and spiral wildly out of control. Ophis glanced in what might have been mild interest. "Oh, this is bad," remarked Azazel. "Aisha was brought here through a special failsafe magic that I'd cast earlier. To the others, particularly Issei, it must have looked like she was killed." Ichigo scowled in the direction that he could see a large, twisted red aura emanating from. "He's entering Juggernaut Drive, isn't he?" "Yes, he is," Azazel confirmed. "And it's most likely going to kill him. That cursed power burns out the life force of the wielder until they die. Varley is an exception, being able to temporarily fuel it using his own ridiculous reserves." "Find a way to get help," Ichigo ordered, sheathing his Zanpakuto. "I'm going over there." As the teenage war hero flew off, Azazel created a communication magic circle. "Hello? This is a code red. Bring me the Projecto.D immediately." With the Gremory group, Riaz and the rest of her peerage watched on in horror as Issei transformed then killed Shalba Beelzebub effortlessly. He raised his now bestial head and roared loudly, the sound full of rage and anguish. They had all retreated back to a safe distance as per Drake's warning. "You guys okay?" came Ichigo's voice as he landed near them. He looked into the crater that Issei stood in. "DMN, this is bad." "Ichigo, what can we do?" Riaz asked pleadingly, openly crying. Issei went berserk after Aisha. "Asia's okay," the spiky-haired youth revealed, making them all stare at him in shock. "She was taken to Azazel by a failsafe magic." "This doesn't look very good," commented a vaguely familiar voice. They turned around to see none other than Varley floating in the air nearby. Biko was also there, standing on a mystic cloud. "What are you doing here, Varley?" Ichigo asked with his trademark scowl. The dark silver-haired teen continued looking in Issei's direction. "We came to see how things are going, and to help out against Deodora and the old Satan faction if needed. Ophis accompanied us." "Hi Tilda, you guys look like you're in a real pickle," said a feminine voice as Ichigo felt a pair of arms wrap around him from behind, followed shortly thereafter by a weight pressing against his back. Kuroka's head came into view over his shoulder, staring into the crater. "The red dragon's gone off the deep end, huh?" Just then, Aisha and their fragment friends arrived, double-taking at Issei's new visage. Ichigo calmly pried Kuroka's arms off himself, missing the Nekashu's pout, and stepped forward. "I'm going to try getting him back to normal, or at the very least, tire him out until Azazel's able to do something." Varla-san," Aisha addressed nervously. "Please help Issei-san too. It's because he thought I died that he became like this. Being the White Dragon Emperor, I'm sure that you can do something." "No," Ichigo refuted. "Issei's not in control right now. If he detects Albient's presence, he'll most likely get worse and die quicker." Without waiting for anyone's reply, he flash-stepped down into the crater, into the Berserk Pawn's vision. Issei snarled threateningly, shifting his footing slightly. Ikchio remained where he was, trying not to do anything that could be seen as threatening. "It's over, Issei," the substitute Soul Reaper called out. "Diodora's dead and Asia's safe. She's alive and waiting for you right now." He received no verbal response, the Draconic being taking a stance and tensing. "Stop this already, Issei, you'll die if you don't." "Do you really want to put Riaz through that, or any of your friends for that matter?" Issei raised his left arm towards Ichigo, an orb of energy building up. The orange-haired teen slowly gripped his weapon's hilt, making the cloth binding unravel. "I really don't want to do this, Issei, but you're not giving me many options here." "Reminds me of when you went full hollow on that Ulquiorra guy," remarked his inner hollow. "Except you weren't so massive." "Seriously, not the time," Ichigo mentally chastised. He flash-stepped out the way of the incoming, overpowered dragon shot. Bankai! Ichigo sped out of the red-outlined black spiritual power that briefly obscured him from view, his hollow mask already manifested over his face. With a loud shout, he unleashed a black Getsuga onto his rampant opponent. The attack hit Issei's head from above and forced it down. The green eyes on his transformed head blinked before he threw it back and roared angrily. Seeing that his current strength really wasn't going to be enough, Ichigo triggered his full hollow transformation. Issei started charging up another energy attack, this time from his fanged mouth. In response, the hollowified teenager began charging a Sero from his left hand. Both techniques were released simultaneously, clashing head-on. They struggled for DMs for a few moments, then blasted apart. Ichigo rushed through the resulting smoke cloud and punched Issei in the side of his head, knocking it away. "Wake up, Issei," the Soul Reaper bellowed in his dual-tone voice. "Do you really want to die like this? Don't you want to carry on living with everyone who's precious to you and protect them like a man?" He flash-stepped away to dodge a vengeful swipe from the Draconian's large arm. Ichigo quickly held Tensor Zangetsu to the side to block an attempted slash from Issei's other arm when the latter charged at him. Ichigo pushed him back and leaped at his chest in a flying punch. Issei was forced back a few steps, but retaliated by swatting Ichigo away. The substitute recovered in mid-air and rushed forth again, mirrored by Issei. The two beings traded heavy blows, neither backing down. Issei's armor cracked and splintered, as did Ichigo's mask, but both regenerated quickly. The Berserk Red Dragon Emperor lunged at the orange-haired teen with its jaws wide open. Ichigo delivered an uppercut to Issei's oversized chin, forcefully closing his mouth and snapping his head up. Flash-stepping into the air directly above his rampaging friend, Ichigo launched another Getsuga Tensho at him. He followed it up by sending out another two in rapid succession. When the combined attacks dispersed, Issei was revealed on all fours. There was a sudden call of boost from him. Then another almost immediately after. However, before either combatant could do anything further, a large white figure slammed into Issei and pinned him down. Ichigo gave a start as he realized that it was Varley in his own juggernaut drive. The enlarged Ned White Dragon Emperor opened his draconic mouth and bit into his rival's armored neck. Issei thrashed around wildly, successfully shaking Varley off himself a few seconds later. A call of divide rang out from the White Dragon's armored from, followed by Issei slouching over a little. For the next few moments, the enraged pawn boosted in rapid succession whilst Varley kept dividing him and got into a stance. Ichigo gave a low growl of annoyance. This is exactly what he wanted to avoid. He hadn't been told anything for certain, but he was positive that the more riled up Issei became and the more he drew on the boosted Gi's power, the quicker his life force would burn out. He began generating a Sero in his free hand and fueling a Getsuga in the other. With a roaring battle cry, the orange-haired Hollow launched both attacks, sending the Sero crashing into Issei and the Getsuga Tensho into Varley. Both Dragon Emperors were knocked down. As Issei set his sights on him and started to get back up, someone else jumped into the crater. The red-haired form of one Ria's Gremory flew over to Issei, only to be grabbed in one of his large hands. "Issei, please stop," the heiress pleaded with tears streaming down her cheeks. "Please, come back to us. Come back to me. I don't want you to die, Issei. I don't know how I'd live without you." Issei froze up and seemed to jolt ever so slightly. "Bibucho," he said in a dull, somewhat raspy and mechanized voice. Azazel suddenly flew down into their midst, holding what appeared to be some kind of projector. "Sorry I'm late," he shouted. "This should return Issei back to normal." The head-fallen angel pressed a button and the device activated. It projected a large holographic screen. For the next few minutes, it played something which was announced as the Apai Dragon theme song, an utter vocal abomination in Ichigo's opinion. Even more ridiculously, Issei actually seemed to be calming down as he stared at the screen and listened to the song. "Apai?" The hulking teen breathed as though transfixed, which he very well might have been. "Buchos?" "Akino-san's, everyone's." Rias looked a pitiful mix of aghast and mortified. Ichigo dropped his hollowification and ended his Bankai, staring at a proudly grinning Azazel with an "Are you serious?" expression. There was a flash of red light and Issei was back to normal. He looked at Rias with glazed eyes prior to falling forward into her arms. The redhead gasped as she held him protectively, then began crying in relief. Soon enough, all the rest of their friends started coming down to join them, rushing over to Issei and Rias to check on their unconscious friend. The brown-haired teen assured them that he was okay now. Varley cancelled his juggernaut drive, staring at the MSTR and pawn in bewilderment. Biko and Kuroko were at his side a second later. "I don't get it," stated Varley. "Are Ria's Gremory's melons like some kind of SWCH for Issei or something?" Ichigo sighed in exasperation. "Considering this is that idiot we're talking about here, they may very well be." Biko threw his arms into the air along with a rambunctious laugh. "All hail the Apai Dragon and SWCH Princess." Rias yelped in horrified protest at her new title. Ichigo sent her a sympathetic look. Ophis, Azazel, Odin, and Ross Weiss approached them. Before any further exchanges could be made, they all felt an immense presence weigh down on their shoulders. Up above, a shining portal appeared in the swirling mass of colors, followed by great red emerging from it. Everyone watched on in awe as the colossal dragon soared above them. Ophis held out her right hand towards him and clenched it into a fist. "Soon, I'll reclaim my home from you," she said in a monotone, almost like a vow. Issei broke away from the others and walked over to where Varley was, joining his in staring at the Dragon of Dragons. "Can you see it, Issei?" Varley inquired. "The strongest creature in this world, the number one, Great Red." The pawn nodded. "Yeah. That's the level I wish to reach," stated Varley. "To be considered and recognized as the strongest, to be at the top." "I guess I can understand that," said Issei. "But I'm happy being strong enough to protect those I care about and being able to enjoy life with them." The White Dragon Emperor smirked. "It might be for different reasons, but we both want to get stronger. I look forward to seeing you progress, Issei Hayadu." He shifted to face Issei. "Become strong enough to stand as my equal, rival." Issei couldn't help his mouth forming a small smile. "Sure." Ichigo was watching the pair from a small distance, his housemate Sans Koneko standing with him. "What do you know, they're bonding," remarked Kuro. "Yeah, it feels kind of surreal but great at the same time," Nina agreed. Ichigo felt a tug on his sleeve. Craning his head, he saw the dragon guised as a girl to be responsible. "Join me." The fragment stared at her in shock and took a few steps back out of instinct. The orange-haired teen sighed. "I've already said no before, and my answer hasn't changed." Ophis tilted her head. "Why?" "I'm not interested in fighting Great Red. I don't care about any kind of crappy recognition either. All I want is the power to protect the things and people that I care about. I can give you that power." "Thanks, but I'm gonna have to decline. Like I said, I don't care about your squabble with Great Red. If you crave silence so much, how about you leave that farce of an organization and find somewhere to call your own? I've been approached by that Cow guy, and he straight up told me that you're just a figurehead to the Chaos Brigade. They don't care about helping you, they just want you for your power. You want my advice? Leave and find someone who'll let you live freely just as yourself." Ophis stared at him blankly for a few moments. Then, she turned on her heel and made her way over to Varley's two partners. Eventually, everything was cleared up and the old Satan faction members still alive were all rounded up. Varley, Biko, and Kuroko went back, along with Ophis. Issei suddenly dropped to the ground convulsing and passed out. The boosted gear appeared on his arm, looking damaged. Azazel told them that it was the damage caused by Juggernaut Drive finally catching up to him. Fortunately, Aisha was able to heal him and fix the sacred gear thanks to her training. Issei's house. A few days later, all of them were assembled in the expansive living room of Issei's house. They'd been called by Azazel for something really important, which turned out to be a video. More specifically, a video of the Apai Dragon theme song and news that it had become an official hit TV show in the underworld. Issei was the main character, called Issei Gremory on screen. Rias was also there, as the SWCH princess. The redhead had her head hung low in shame and embarrassment, Akino and Nina rubbing her back comfortingly. Issei was awkwardly scratching the back of his head as Drake could be heard crying loudly from the boosted gear. "Wah," the legendary Welsh dragon sobbed. How? How could this have happened? Why? Why have I been reduced to such a humiliating existence? Instead of a legendary heavenly dragon, I'm now known as the BRST Dragon Emperor. And a pie dragon. Wah! Pretty much everyone besides Azazel, who was grinning like a proud madman, sent the sealed dragon a look of sympathy. Ichigo walked over to Issei somberly and gently placed his hand onto the boosted gear. I feel your pain, Drake, he said compassionately. Seriously, I do. Sniff really? Asked Drake. Ichigo gave the gauntlet's gem a small pat. Yeah. A few years back, there was this pervert who managed to hijack control of my body. He went around flirting with my female classmates and completely ruining the image that I'd spent many years carefully crafting. I'd never felt so humiliated in all my life. The dragon sobbed. To think I'd find a kindred spirit in this darkness, another warrior who's also suffered at the hands of a pervert. Let it all out, Drake, said Ichigo soothingly. I'm here for you, friend. You shouldn't keep these things bottled up. At the Soul Reaper's coaxing, Drake continued whimpering, although not as intensely as he was before. Ichigo fixed Issei with a light yet serious glare. Can you see what you've done? You've completely destroyed this poor dragon's self-respect and reputation. Issei looked at his sacred gear guiltily. Sorry, Drake. I really am. I'll try to find some way to make this up to you. Ichigo continued stroking the boosted gear and comforting Drake. Meanwhile, everyone else was staring in bewilderment. They could practically feel a soothing aura rolling off the substitute. He's giving counseling to a dragon, observed Kuro. One of the heavenly dragons to boot. Azazel gave a soft whistle. DMN, this kid just keeps on surprising me. He took out a notepad and jotted something down. I wonder what other things he's capable of? Ni-san is amazing, said Koneko in visible awe. Omake, Ophis Big Brother, Part 4. Ichigo and his fragment housemates arrived in the dimensional gap where Deodora had relocated the fake rating game to. However, instead of a swarm of enemy soldiers, they were met with a drastically different sight. All around them, the bodies of Chaos Brigade members littered the ground, either dead or bound. Deodora was dead, his vacant eyes wide. As were several old Satan faction leaders. Rias and the rest of her peerage were next to the group, looking around in confusion. Standing a small distance in front of them was a certain Infinity Dragon. Behind her was Vali, Biko and Kuroka, all three looking around awkwardly. Great Red could be seen flying in the air above them. Aisha was next to Ophis, safe and sound. The blonde nun quickly ran over to Issei and hugged him. He gently patted her head in response. Ophis, called Ichigo. Could you please explain what's going on? Or rather, what happened here? Ophis nodded and gave him a small smile. They were planning to attack you and your friend's big brother, saying that they were going to kill you all and reclaim the underworld. She stepped over to Ichigo, stopping just in front of him. I took care of them and saved that girl from Deodora. Ichigo exhaled but relaxed all the same. He could tell what the dragon wanted. Thanks a lot, Ophis, you've really helped us all out. He patted her head in a brotherly manner, giving a soft smile too. Koneko stepped up to Ophis' side. Everyone held their breath, expecting a confrontation. Kuroka felt as though she was going to have a heart attack. The Infinity Dragon's eyes glanced in her direction. Suddenly, the petite Nekashu hugged her. Thank you for saving Aisha-senpai. And for helping us. An extremely faint hint of red colored Ophis' cheeks. No problem. You're welcome, sister. While Ichigo was ruffling the two girls' opposite-colored hair, Odin was gaping at the scene, as was Ross Weiss. Azazel, am I dreaming? The Norse leader questioned. The leader of the fallen angels smirked. Nope, this is all real, old man. There's a reason why this kid is our greatest ally, he tamed Ophis. Ross Weiss continued looking at. The spectacle centered around Ichigo. Good with children? She muttered. Barely a second later, her face turned entirely scarlet. Chapter 29. Preparations and Developments. Ichigo's house. Ichigo, Koneko, Kuro, Nina, and Shadow were lounging about in the living room. Ichigo was reading a manga about a bunch of kids at a hero academy. It was set in a world in which 90% of the population possessed superpowers, but the main character lacked any. Still, he genuinely wanted to be a hero despite that. He ended up meeting the world's greatest hero and became his protege, inheriting his power. Kuro was playing a co-op game with Koneko. It was a hack-and-slash beat-'em-up hybrid. Nina was reading a sci-fi book, stroking Shadow while she did, the small fragment lying down next to her like a cat. The doorbell rang, eliciting a small sigh from Ichigo. "I'll get it." Upon opening the door, he came face to face with Slycer, Grafia, Azazel, Odin, Ross Weiss, and an unknown man who he sensed to be a fallen angel. They were all dressed in casual clothing. The teen quirked an eyebrow at the unusual party. "Hello Ichigo, how are you?" the crimson-haired devil greeted in a friendly way. Ichigo folded his arms neutrally. "Fine enough. I'm guessing that there's something you want my help with again?" Slycer gave a mildly embarrassed chuckle. "Wow, that obvious who? Although I suppose all of us coming here like this is a rather large giveaway." Grafia cleared her throat lightly. "Whoops, sorry for going off track. This is more of a request than an urgent matter," he explained. "You see, Odin asked us if we could provide an SCRT for him as he goes somewhere. My younger sister and her peerage have agreed already. Odin himself also requested if you could join, saying that you're skilled enough from what he saw during the operation against Deodora." "Well, I find the boy to be fairly interesting," Odin remarked, running a hand through his long beard. "Although I did it more for Rosswei's sake than my own. She actually has quite a good chance with him." His Valkyrie bodyguard spluttered something unintelligible and blushed. Ichigo sent the elder man a blank, somewhat disapproving stare. "Stop bullying her, old man." Unfortunately, his reaction only caused Odin to give a full-blown laugh. He's already so protective of her too, he lightly nudged Ross Weiss with his elbow. "If you play your cards right, maybe you can nab him during the journey, eh?" The silver-haired girl didn't reply, her blush intensifying as she dipped her head in embarrassment. "Fun and jokes aside," said Azazel, catching the Soul Reaper's attention. "What do you say, kid? Feel like tagging along?" Ichigo took a moment to consider his answer. Eventually, he gave a slight shrug. "Why not? We're on break right now, and I don't have anything urgent to take care of." Everyone gave him smiles of varying degrees in response, even Ross Weiss. "Very well," said Slycer. "We'll send for you tomorrow before we need to go. It will be early afternoon." "Thank you again, Ichigo. I think it's time we head back and finish up some of our outstanding business." Ichigo nodded once. "All right. Take care." The group turned on their heels and began walking away, but Azazel stayed back. "You know, you've actually gained quite a few fans within the Grigori, particularly the female variety," he whispered almost secretively. "If you want, I could help link you up." "Not interested," the orange-haired hero refuted almost instantly. Azazel blinked, staring at the teen as though he were seeing someone else in his place. He clicked his tongue. "Well, it's your loss, kid. Have a nice day." The man casually stuck his hands into his pockets and moved away, catching up to the others. Ichigo closed the door. He should let the others know about this. Next day, Ichigo and his housemate stood outside their residence, waiting for the others to arrive. A few minutes later, the group from yesterday plus the rest of Ria's peerage arrived. Ajuka Beelzebub was also going to join them. "Are you all ready?" inquired Slycer. They gave him a resolute nod in response. "Great. In that case, let's be off." For the most part, the journey was uneventful. Due to Odin's insistence, Ichigo was positioned near him, right next to Ross Weiss in fact. The teenage Valkyrie had an almost perpetual dusting of red on her face and her head was slightly dipped, especially since Odin kept on whispering to or nudging her with his elbow. The orange-haired Soul Reaper would have spoken out, but he had the impression that it would only encourage the elderly leader to further embarrass his bodyguard. All in all, it looked like it was going to be a rather peaceful SCRT. However, Ichigo had the gut feeling that something was close to happening, thus keeping his senses alert. It paid off after a while, when he detected a blast of energy coming their way. Grabbing Zangetsu with lightning speed, he swung the Zanpakuto off his back and slashed in the direction that the attack was coming from, sending out a nameless Getsuga to intercept it. Both attacks collided and cancelled each other out. Everyone else got ready as they looked up. There was a man floating in the air. He was dressed in silver clothing and had more or less matching silver hair along with a blue gem that was worn on his forehead. He had an irritated expression on his face. A small distance away from him were two others that Ichigo and his friends recognized with a start. Nemesis and the cloaked fragment that could spawn soldiers. Odin sighed exasperatedly. Loki. He glared at the infamous trickster with his lone eye. What is the meaning of this, boy? Loki's scowl deepened. I'm tired of your foolishness, father. It's bad enough that you're involving us with these mongrels, but to think that you actually want to declare peace and an alliance with them. I refuse to accept this. Nemesis held his sword on his left shoulder. I'm helping out since I had a feeling Ichigo would get involved. Plus, I always did love a bit of chaos. Loki-sama, do you really intend to go against our leader's decision? Asked Rossweiss in shock. Quiet, Loki snapped. Do you think I would be here attacking you if I agreed with it, you fool? His eyes focused on Odin. I shall kill you and commence Ragnarok. Come, Fenrir. At his command, a portal opened up, out of which pounced a giant wolf with black fur and its fangs bared. Everyone tensed up in anticipation. Suddenly, a blast of magic raced towards Loki, who quickly put up a shield to block it. Craning their heads to see who had launched it, they caught sight of an unexpected group. Namely, Varley, who was in Balance Breaker, and the rest of his team, Ikaroka, Biko, and the Pendragon siblings. Before anything further could take place, an array of seals surrounded Loki, his lupine son, and their two fragment allies. A look of surprise and fury came upon the trickster's face before they all vanished. I've trapped them in a special holding dimension, announced Ajuka. It'll hold for 2 days at most. We should plan on who to send in to deal with them after returning to the Red Dragon's house. Still doesn't explain what they're doing here, Ichigo muttered in regards to Varley and his group, lowering his sword but keeping it at the ready. Issei had his boosted gear summoned. A tense expression was on the pawn's face. Oi, Varley. What are you guys doing here? Relax, Hayadu, his rival replied calmly. We're not here to fight any of you. We actually came to help. It's true, affirmed Azazel. They contacted me just before we set out, even gave a warning that Loki might attack. Of course, I wasn't entirely sure at the time if they were telling the truth or not. The red and white, fighting together as allies, Surzex mused quietly. If they truly intend to help us, then I think we should let them. After all, our opponent is rather formidable. Later, Hayadu residents. All of them had returned to Issei's rebuilt and massive house. Sona and her peerage had also come over to prepare and assist in the upcoming battle. The plan that they had come up with was that they'd use a replica of Thor's hammer, Mjolnir, to deal the finishing blow to Loki. That task would fall to Issei. They were waiting for the replica to arrive so that they could test it. Azazel also remarked that they'd speak with Midgardsormr, one of the Dragon Kings, for advice against Loki and Fenrir. Riaz and Biko were currently bickering vehemently over the nickname, SWCH Princess, that the monkey yokai had coined for the Crimson Heiress at the end of the Diodora fiasco. It's all your fault. Riaz accused tearfully. Because of you, everyone in the underworld keeps calling me that weird name now. Biko was rubbing his sore cheek from an earlier smack. Deal with it, SWCH. And stop taking your frustrations out on me. Stop calling me that. Vali was sat down on a sofa opposite Issei, reading a book on Norse magic. Ichigo was sat down next to the brown-haired pawn, relaxing. "What an unexpected situation we're in, eh, Albion?" Drake's voice inquired. "The two of us working together instead of against each other." He received no response. "Albion?" "Shut up," the White Dragon Emperor's voice snapped. "I refuse to talk with someone titled as the Apai Dragon. I refuse to acknowledge you as my rival." Drake's voice took on a panicked tone. "Wait, Albion. It's my partner Issei who is the Apai Dragon, not me." Albion sniffed sadly. "When I heard the news, I felt so lost. What had happened to the proud heavenly dragon that I respected and considered my equal? How could you have sunk so low?" "My mind was in turmoil, Drake." "Really?" Drake questioned in mild surprise. "To think that you also suffered due to the actions of my idiotic host. I'm sorry for what he's done, Albion. It was entirely him and not me. I never want to be referred to as something like that." Ichigo sent Issei a light glare, the latter giving a nervous chuckle. Vali had a complicated expression on his face. A couple of seconds later, Odin walked into the room. "I have to admit, I never thought that I'd see the day when the two heavenly dragons work together to help me defeat my errant son," the Norse leader remarked with a chuckle. He ran a hand through his beard and made a contemplative sound. "Tell me, White Dragon Boy, what's your preference?" Vali raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "Well, the red one is obsessed with melons and is now regarded as the BRST Dragon Emperor," Odin elaborated, causing Ichigo to facepalm in exasperation and irritation. "I'm asking which part of a woman you prefer." "I don't bother with such stupid things," Vali growled in annoyance. Seeing Odin smirk and realizing that he wouldn't drop the subject until he received an answer, he sighed. "Fine. If I had to choose, then I suppose I'd say the hip. That region is what embodies the physical beauty of a woman." Odin's smirk grew wider, making the dark silver-haired teen grow increasingly uneasy. "I see," the elder commented. "Then that makes you a Dragon Emperor." "No," wailed Drake and Albion in unison. Both dragons fell into a series of incoherent sobs whilst Odin started roaring with laughter. "Hey, leave them alone, old man," Issei chided. "The dragons are going through a very sensitive phase right now, don't make it worse for them. And whose fault is it that they're in this situation in the first place?" Ichigo probed accusingly. Issei sheepishly scratched the back of his head and summoned his boosted gear. Ichigo got up and walked over, setting a hand on the gauntlet. "It's all right, Drake, I'm here for you. Take all the time you need, my friend. Ignore all the stupid perverts around you. You know who you really are, and that's nothing near what they've got in their heads. Think back to happier times, Drake." Vali watched in a mix of confusion and awe. "Hayadu, is he?" "Yeah," Issei confirmed whilst looking off to the side in order to avoid Ichigo's scowl. Ichigo's sort of become Drake's therapist ever since Azazel made that TV show and video. Vali summoned his divine dividing and sent Ichigo a complicated yet pleading look. "Do you think you could?" The orange-haired Soul Reaper sighed. "Sure, I'll speak with Albion too. Just let me finish consoling Drake first." Much later, when the teenage war hero had finally pacified the two distraught dragons, Ichigo was standing outside the guest room that had been assigned to him for the duration of his stay. He'd just finished inspecting the room and putting his pajamas onto the bed for later. Ahead in the hallway, he saw his pseudo-little sister approaching him at a steady pace. Koneko's cat ears and tail were out, something she was doing more often when away from normal humans. Suddenly, the orange-haired substitute felt a weight press against his back, along with a pair of slender arms wrapping around his chest from behind. Finally, Kuroka's head came into view over his right shoulder. The smile on her face was somewhere between mischievous and playful. "Hi Tilda," the black-haired Nekashu purred as she nuzzled against him. Ichigo's face remained impassive as he fought against the blush that threatened to show due to the close contact. "What do you want, Kuroka?" She gave him a mock pout. "Don't be so mean, Ichigo-kun." Her face returned to the previous smile. We're working together now, right? Is there anything wrong with me wanting to get to know my new ally? You don't suddenly hug someone that you want to know more about, Ichigo countered neutrally. He gently yet firmly grasped one of Kuroka's wrists to move her arm off him. The orange-haired hero felt a slight sensation of warmth come over him along with a subtly sweet scent. His mind felt faintly fuzzy. Somewhere in the back, he heard his inner hollow give an admiring whistle followed by a comment of DMN, "This girl is one sly kitty." By now, Koneko had reached the pair. Her brow was lightly furrowed. "Kuroka Wani-san, please get off of Nii-san," she scolded. "And stop using pheromones to try and stuck him." Kuroka pouted and unwrapped herself from the young Soul Reaper's frame. "Naya, you're no fun, Shironi." The strange warmth and haze that Ichigo had been experiencing quickly vanished. "Thanks for that, Koneko," he said appreciatively. "Anyway, is there something that you wanted to tell me?" The white-haired girl smiled and nodded in reply. "Yes. Azazel-sensei is calling us in the living room. He said that it's about part of our strategy for the upcoming battle against Loki. I suppose we should get going then," the teenage Soul Reaper mused. He started walking away with a moderate stride. "Come on you two, let's see what he has to say." Living room. Most of the group was gathered together before Azazel. The leader of the fallen angels had a golden hammer with engravings carved into its sides on the floor in front of him. "This," began Azazel, "is the focal point of our plan for dealing with Loki. It's a replica of Thor's hammer. We intend for Issei to transfer his dragon power to this and use it to deal the finishing blow. Before that though, why don't you come here and test it out?" The resident pervert slowly walked forward and approached the hammer. "Well, here goes." He summoned the boosted gear and grasped the handle, then lifted the weapon up. As he did so, however, the hammer grew in size and weight until it was as large as his torso. "DMN, that's heavy," the brown-haired pawn remarked as he was forced to slowly lower the replica hammer back down until it was once again resting on the floor. The moment he relinquished his hold on the handle, it shrunk back to its previous size. "It's said that Mjolnir only accepts those who are pure of heart and worthy to lift it," commented Azazel with a hand under his chin. A teasing smirk broke out on his face. "I guess that means it views your perverted heart as unworthy, kid." The others had mixed reactions to the statement. "What?" Issei exclaimed in shock. "That's not fair. It can't just judge me like that, it's a part of who I am." His friends and fellow peerage members had different thoughts run through their minds at his outburst. There were a few chuckles too. Ichigo folded his arms calmly. "Maybe you should take this as a wake-up call and change your ways." Issei turned to face him, his expression almost tearful. "I said that I was sorry. Besides, I couldn't change such an intrinsic part of my nature so quickly even if I wanted to." Just out of curiosity, Ichigo reached out with his senses to get a brief scan on the replica of the legendary weapon. Without warning, the hammer leaped off the ground and flew straight towards the teenage Soul Reaper. Reacting like lightning, Ichigo grabbed Zangetsu from his back and held it in front of himself to block the rapidly incoming projectile. Everyone, especially the Norse members and Azazel, watched in surprise as the hammer clanged against the Zanpakuto. It stayed there, suspended in mid-air and pressed against the flat side of the larger weapon, for a long few seconds before finally dropping to the floor at Ichigo's feet. "So," the spiky-haired substitute said as he returned his sword to its usual place on his back. "Anyone care to explain why the hammer just tried to sucker punch me?" Odin stared at the replica Mjolnir with a contemplative look in his eye. He stroked his beard and gave a hum. "Tell me, boy, did you do anything prior to the hammer moving?" "Sort of," he replied. "All I did was try to actively sense it." "And it responded to your probing by flying towards you?" asked Odin. Ichigo scratched the back of his head. "Yeah. Is there any significance to that?" Odin hummed thoughtfully. "Even if it's not the real thing, it's still a replica of Mjolnir," the aged leader thought. "Some characteristics are the same, like only accepting those who are pure of heart and worthy. The fact that it flew towards him means that it accepted him and tried going to him." "Interesting. He cleared his throat. Azazel, get Surzex and Ajuka. I have something to discuss with you brats involving our plans against Loki. All right, old man, the head fallen complied. Go on ahead to the same meeting room we used last time. I'll grab the others. You kids are free to do whatever you want for the rest of the night. With that, the two leaders walked away, Ross Weiss trailing after Odin. Slowly, everyone else also broke away and went off to do their own things. Ichigo made his way down to the training room. Issei's house, Ichigo's guest room. Ichigo gave a brief stretch after entering the room, having just finished up in the private bathroom. He was already dressed in his pajamas and ready to call it a day. A slender pair of arms unexpectedly encircled his torso from behind. He had a good guess on who it was. What do you want, Kuroka? He sighed. The black-haired Nekashu flashed him a mischievous smile. Naya, I thought I'd drop by and see how you were, Tilda. Ichigo slowly removed her arms from his person. As you can see, I'm about to head to bed. He calmly stepped away and turned around to face her. Maybe I could keep you company, Tilda, she accentuated the statement with a wink. He gave her a blank stare in response, although a faint blush did color his cheeks. Out! Now! Kuroka sent him a mock-hurt expression. Naya, so cruel, Ichigo-kun, even after my heartfelt offer. Although, I actually don't mind if you do want to get a little naughty, Tilda. The spiky-haired teen exhaled deeply and sat down on the edge of the bed. You're not going to leave anytime soon, are you? All the girl gave him in response was a playful grin along with a swish of her twin tails. All right, let's talk for a while. I've got a few things that I've been wanting to ask you anyway. He patted the spot next to him for emphasis. For a short moment, Kuroka seemed genuinely surprised. She quickly recovered though, and proceeded to slowly approach the bed. Softly landing on the mattress, she turned her head to face him. I'm going to be rather blunt, just to let you know, Ichigo stated in advance. I've heard a few things about you, none of them very pleasant. Our first encounter didn't really help either. His companion's cat ears drooped slightly, and she looked a little uncomfortable. Still, he pressed on. There's something that doesn't seem to add up for me though. I was told that you went crazy from the overuse of senjutsu, but so far you seem pretty normal to me. I've had the displeasure of having met a few power-hungry and crazed people myself, but you don't match up with that. Kuroka's hazel eyes widened as she registered his speech. Plus, I can't help but feel as though there's a lot more regarding why you killed your MSTR all those years ago. The black-haired Nekashu looked down and gave a small chuckle. You really have a way with words, don't you? Yes, there is more to why I did what I did all those years ago. Well, I'm not going anywhere, Ichigo gently encouraged. I'm willing to hear what you have to say, your side of the story so to speak. I want to know for both my sake and your sister's. Kuroka let out a forlorn sigh. Back then, when the two of us were just orphans and struggling to get by, our MSTR seemed like a nice person. He took us in, fed us and gave us a home. However, that was all just a front. His true nature was cruel and twisted, to the point where he used to experiment on his own peerage members. Ichigo's hands tightened into fists, but he maintained his silence. Despite that, I was willing to carry on, because Shironi, who was unaware of those atrocities, was happy with her life. It was only when our MSTR expressed an interest in starting experiments on her that I lashed out. He wasn't willing to back down, and I didn't want her to go through anything as horrific as that. That's the reason why I killed him. It was never for myself, or because I'd gone drunk with power, it was all for my beloved sister's well-being. I was going to take her with me, but couldn't get to her in time and had to leave her behind. She gave a small, bitter laugh. Now she's afraid of me and probably hates me too, but I'm fine with that because she's happy with her life and friends. Unbelievable, Ichigo growled out, somewhat startling the busty girl beside him. His fists were trembling. This happened how long ago, and nobody even bothered to properly check into it. You're literally an innocent victim. Heck, I'd have done the exact same thing if I was in that position. The young Soul Reaper had a brief flashback to when he stormed Soul Society to save Rukia and his fight with Byakuya atop Sogyoku Hill, where he'd lectured the former to screw the rules and save his sister. Isn't there anyone else who's aware of this? Overcoming her shock, yet still staring at him in awe, Kuroka gave an uncharacteristically timid response. Not that I know of. All of my old peerage members died back then as well. Didn't this creep keep any records of what he used to do? The orange-haired teen pressed. I think he used to keep a journal for the experiments, she revealed. It might still be at the lab, or someone may have gotten rid of it. That's still better than nothing at all, Ichigo remarked. A determined scowl came upon his face. I'll speak to Slycer about this tomorrow, probably even Ajuka as well. They should be able to sort something, clear your name at the very least. Kuroka couldn't believe the words she was hearing from the boy next to her. You'd really do that? Why? You barely know me. That's besides the point, Ichigo refuted firmly yet gently. You shouldn't have had to go through any of that CRP, and your sister shouldn't have had to suffer the stupid repercussions for it. There was a resolute gleam in his chocolate-brown eyes as he regarded her. I promise to do whatever's in my power to sort this out for you. A red hue manifested across the black-haired Nekashu's cheeks. If you keep saying things like that, I really won't be able to hold myself back, Naya. Even if nobody else is willing to help you, I won't just abandon you, he declared seriously. I've literally fought against an entire army for a single person's sake before, and I'll do the same for you. Her face burning and heart pounding, Kuroka decided to throw caution to the wind and strike. Moving quickly, she cupped the sides of the teenage Soul Reaper's face with her hands and brought their faces together, causing his brown eyes to widen. The resulting embrace was simple and gentle, yet full of unspoken emotion. After a length of time that neither were really sure about, they parted. Both had a moderate amount of scarlet adorning their cheeks. Normally, Ichigo would have started freaking at something like this, however he felt the escalating embarrassment and panic quickly subside upon seeing Kuroka's sincere, affectionate gaze. I've decided, the dark-haired Nekashu stated almost breathlessly, her hands languidly draped around his shoulders. Her mouth formed into a genuine, happy smile. I really do like you after all. Ichigo, for his part, was speechless. Taking a second to regain his bearings, he found his voice. Does that mean you're planning on staying with you even after the battle with Loki? Yes, if you're okay with it, she confirmed. I don't mind, he told her. He slightly averted his gaze, still feeling rather flustered. By any chance, was that your first just now? Kuroka inquired. The orange-haired youth glanced at her. Yeah. I'm still just a little surprised about it. She giggled and leaned forward to embrace him, resting her face in the crook of his neck. Her twin tails also curled around his waist. It was mine as well if that helps. But I meant what I said, I really do like and want to stay with you. You're a good person, and Shrione seems so happy with you. Despite the lingering, awkward nervousness he felt, Ichigo slowly wrapped his own arms around her. I plan on helping you patch things up with her, you know. She deserves to know the truth, and you deserve to be with your younger sister again. Kuroka tensed ever so slightly. I'm not so sure. Shirone's still afraid of me, and I don't think she'll believe it coming from my mouth. Don't worry, I'll be there too, he reassured. Like I said before, I plan to tell Slycer about this too at the very least, so he should be able to provide something official. Besides, your sister might be a little scared of you, but she doesn't hate you. I'll think about it, came her unsure response. But thank you. After a moment of silence, she put forward a request of her own. Can I stay with you tonight? We don't have to do anything, I just want to sleep next to you. Ichigo felt a brief sense of déjà vu, but brushed it off. He suppressed a chuckle at how similar to the two sisters could be. Sure you can. Disengaging from the hug, both of them calmly got under the covers. Kuroka quietly shuffled up to Ichigo and laid her head on his chest, her tails wrapping around his torso again. A content purr left her mouth. Enjoying each other's company, the pair maintained a pleasant silence as they drifted off. Next day afternoon, living room. Kuroka stood near the door, having just entered the room along with Ichigo. When morning came, the couple had sought out the crimson-haired Mao and explained their request. While initially skeptical, Slycer kept an open mind about it and complied to have a thorough search performed. After that, everyone had been busy going out and making preparations, such as accompanying Azazel when he went to contact one of the Dragon Kings and Loki's son, Midgardsormr, for advice on how to defeat his father and brother, Fenrir. The image of the massive dragon had suggested using the magic chain, Gleipnir, to deal with Fenrir. In accordance to that, Azazel and Odin started working through the necessary channels in order to acquire the chain once they were done conversing with the dragon. When they returned to their temporary HQ, Issei's house, they were free to prepare as they wished. Around midday, Slycer and Greyfear approached Ichigo and requested if he could bring Kuroka along for a private discussion. The four of them gathered in the orange-haired substitute's borrowed room. Slycer explained how he'd asked Greyfear to head the investigation whilst they'd headed out that morning. It was a slide of luck that Kuroka's former MSTR had carried out his experiments in a hidden lab that he'd built privately. Thus, it had remained undisturbed when the search team entered it using the location details that the black-haired Nekashu had provided. The main pieces of evidence found were a logbook detailing the deceased devil's experiments and plans in brief detail, and an assortment of notes and papers that went into greater depth on specific projects and peerage members. Needless to say, Greyfear and the rest of the squad were convinced, as was Slycer when they reported back and revealed their findings. Working alongside Ajuka and sending a message to Slycer, the Devil King was able to forward a copy of the proof and officially clear Kuroka's name of all charges related to the incident. He also gave her a personal apology. The Nekomata had been emotional to say the least. The moment Slycer and his wife left the room, she tackled Ichigo with a hug. She thanked him incoherently amidst her emotional yet relieved sobs. For his part, the teenage Soul Reaper gently comforted and congratulated her. Thus, they were now in their current situation. The pair were stood by the living room door, observing Koneko, who was calmly sitting on the sofa and reading a book. Hardly anyone else was around, something that made things somewhat easier for Kuroka. "Go on," Ichigo gently urged, lightly pushing her forward. "It's time for you to finally set things right." Kuroka nodded in acceptance despite still feeling a bit hesitant. "I know, it's just... I'm not sure how to. Just ask her if you can talk for a while, then tell her the truth and what's happened today," Ichigo calmly supported, giving a brief squeeze to her shoulders. "Don't worry, I'll be right here the whole time." Slowly, the elder sister approached the snow-haired Rook, who lifted her head to look at her while she drew closer. Kuroka sent a small, nervous smile. "Hello, Shironi. How are you?" Koneko slightly tilted her head. After a second, she responded. "I'm okay, Wani-san. Is there something you want?" A small, awkward chuckle escaped Kuroka's lips as she tried to compose herself. "Can we talk for a while?" She received an affirmative nod. Taking that as her cue, the black-haired Nekashu sat down and took a breath. "I want to talk about what happened all those years ago. About the real reason why I killed our old king." Koneko visibly tensed and adopted an apprehensive facial expression. Nevertheless, she replied with an okay. "Shironi, the devil who took us in and gave us a home," Kuroka began, keeping her head facing down. "He wasn't the nice person that either of us thought he was. His real nature was twisted and power-hungry, to the point where he regularly experimented on me and the other peerage members." Her younger sibling's hazel eyes widened in a mixture of emotions. Kuroka felt moisture starting to build up in her own oculus. "I didn't ever mention it to you because I didn't want to scare you or upset you. I was fine with it as long as you were still happy. But then, he decided that he wanted to experiment on you as well, because of the innate senjutsu abilities you possessed." The tears broke out from Kuroka's eyes. "I couldn't bear that thought, Shironi. I didn't want you to ever have to go through something like that, so I killed him. I wanted to run away with you, to take you somewhere that you'd be safe and happy, but I couldn't get to you in time. I'm sorry that you had to suffer the consequences of what I did. Koneko was openly crying, a myriad of emotions flashing through her eyes and over her face. But you are they told. Her words were barely decipherable amidst the sobs. Kuroka looked like she wanted to console her somehow, however didn't know how to. Ichigo decided that now was a good time for him to step in. Everything she said just now was the truth, he stated firmly upon nearing them. Koneko looked at him in surprise. I asked Surzex to investigate. They found the hidden lab, as well as various papers and a logbook describing the experiments. Your sister's been officially cleared of her charges and pardoned too. She's going to be staying with us once we're done with the battle tomorrow. Hearing his words, the white-haired Nekashu couldn't hold it in any longer and started to wail unhindered. Letting out all her grief over the past years in addition to the happiness of what she'd just learnt, she promptly tackled her older sister and hugged her tightly. Overcoming her initial shock, Kuroka returned the embrace and softly stroked the younger girl's hair. Sending him a meaning glance, Kuroka indicated for the orange-haired hero to join them. A soft smile adorning his features, he carefully drew closer to the pair and wrapped his arms around them. It's all right, Koneko, he soothed. Both of us are here for you, and always will be. The small girl sniffed and hiccuped, but still gave him a grateful look and smile. Nii-san, thank you. Thank you so much. In response, Ichigo gently tightened his arms around them in an affectionate squeeze. It's what family do for each other. Oh make. The group turned on their heels and began walking away from Ichigo, but Azazel stayed back. You've actually gained quite a few fans within the Grigori, particularly the female variety, he whispered almost secretively. If you want, I could help link you up. Not interested, the orange-haired hero refuted almost instantly. Azazel blinked, staring at the teen as though he were seeing someone else in his place. Say, do you happen to have any relatives with spiky blonde hair and blue eyes? Ichigo sent the man an "Are you serious?" expression. No, I'm not related to Cloud Strife. But there are so many parallels. Azazel remarked. You both have spiky hair, use massive swords as big as you are, and have a pretty blunt no-nonsense attitude. Have you heard yourself? Ichigo asked rhetorically. You're asking me if I'm related to a video game character, you crazy old crow. All right, how about we say that you were the inspiration for him, offered the head fallen. Heck, I'm sure that you could actually pull off an Omnislash too if you tried. Go talk to a wall, replied the teen bluntly. Squall Leonhardt as well? Deciding that actions would speak better than words, Ichigo promptly slammed the door shut, leaving Azazel by himself. After a second of silent pondering, the man began walking away to join the others he'd come with. I think that this is the beginning of a appealing new project. Oh make two. Ichigo was standing outside the guest room that had been assigned to him for the duration of his stay. He'd just finished inspecting the room and putting his pajamas onto the bed for later. Ahead in the hallway, he saw his pseudo-little sister approaching him at a steady pace. Koneko's cat ears and tail were out, something she was doing more often when away from normal humans. Suddenly, the orange-haired substitute felt a weight press against his back, along with a pair of slender arms wrapping around his chest from behind. Finally, Kuroka's head came into view over his right shoulder. The smile on her face was somewhere between mischievous and playful. Hi Tilda, the black-haired Nekashu purred as she nuzzled against him. Ichigo's face remained impassive as he fought against the blush that threatened to show due to the close contact. What do you want, Kuroka? She gave him a mock pout. Don't be so mean, Ichigo-kun. Her face returned to the previous smile. We're working together now, right? Is there anything wrong with me wanting to get to know my new ally? You don't suddenly hug someone that you want to know more about, Ichigo countered neutrally. He gently yet firmly grasped one of Kuroka's wrists to move her arm off him. The orange-haired hero felt a slight sensation of warmth come over him along with a subtly sweet scent. His mind felt faintly fuzzy. By now, Koneko had reached the pair. Her brow was lightly furrowed. Kuroka Wani-san, please get off of Nii-san, she scolded. and stop using pheromones to try and stuck him. Kuroka pouted and clicked her tongue at being called out. However, a sly smile quickly manifested on her countenance. Naya, Shironi-chan, don't be like that. Besides, if Ichigo becomes my mate, then he'll really be your niece and Tilda. The younger Nekashu's ears suddenly twitched. What? Ichigo spluttered, a fierce crimson blush now visible on his face. Suddenly, he felt Koneko grab his hand. Turning his head towards her, he saw that she was looking at him with deep, pleading eyes. The white-haired rook continued staring at him with those illegally cute eyes. Please, become my real Nii-san. Chapter 30. Berserk Showdown. Issei's house, Ichigo's guest room. The orange-haired teen let out a mumbled sound as he slowly woke up. As his fuzzy brain steadily focused, he remembered that it was finally the day that they would confront Loki. He tried shifting to move out of the bed, but was prevented by a foreign weight across his body. Craning his neck, he caught sight of Kuroka lying on top of him, still sleeping and with her arms wrapped around his torso. He gently nudged her shoulder in an effort to rouse her from the confines of slumber. Hey, it's time to get up, he gently whispered. The black-haired Nekashu muttered something incoherent and snuggled into him further. No, don't wanna, too comfy, she murmured when he continued trying to wake her up. Come on, don't be like that, Ichigo chided softly. We need to get ready for the fight against Loki. We can't keep everyone waiting. She wearily cracked open one of her hazel eyes, giving him a bleary look. Tell that dumb trickster to break out some other day. You're warm and comfy. His mouth curled into a small smirk. Sorry, but I don't think he'll cooperate. You can curl up and laze about all you want afterwards. Kuroka lifted her head slightly, sending him a pout. Finally, she sighed. Fine. Outside. The members of Ichigo's house, Ria's and Sona's peerages, Varley's team and Rossweiss, decked out in Valkyrie armor, were gathered outside, making last-minute preparations. They were joined by Surzex, Grafia, Ajuka, Azazel and Odin. Hey old man, what happened to the hammer? Issei inquired, noticing the replica Mjolnir's absence. The leader of the Norse faction grinned. Scrapped it. We have a new plan now. We're going to use the real thing, not a replica. I got in contact with Thor, he's agreed to lend us his weapon against Loki. We'll send it in when it arrives. Either you or the orange kid use it to deal the final blow. His first choice though, since he can hold it easily. Issei slightly deflated, along with a groan of don't remind me. The magical chain to restrain Fenrir will also arrive later, Surzex added. Please be careful and try to hold out until you receive them. Ajuka stepped forth, a glowing magic circle with algorithms orbiting it floating above his open palm. If everyone is ready, I can send you into the prison dimension. Giving him a nod of confirmation, they prepared to be transported. Holding dimension. The teens appeared in a flash of light. They surveyed the surroundings, noting that the setting was some kind of rocky canyon expanse. So you miserable insects have decided to finally make your appearance, called a haughty voice. The friends shifted their gaze to see Loki floating in the air, Nemesis and the cloaked fragment also floating alongside him. The Norse trickster glared at them in disapproval. Have the three factions become so arrogant as to send children against me? Fools! You come to your deaths. Come, Fenrir! With that, the battle kicked off. The two heavenly dragon hosts went into Balance Breaker and took to the skies to face off against Loki. As expected, Ichigo rushed to meet Nemesis head-on, activating Bankai and Balance Breaker in quick succession. Irina revealed her new status as an angel, and started combat against Fenrir alongside Zenobia and the rest of the group. Kuro, Nina, and Shadow dealt with the cloaked fragment and any soldiers that it spawned from its eldritch body. Nemesis had gone into his own enhanced form to even the playing field against the spiky-haired Soul Reaper. The two opponents repeatedly clashed as they raced through the air. After crossing swords and pulling away, Nemesis immediately launched a massive skull of purple energy at the teen, its jaws open wide. The spectral projectile closed its mouth around Ichigo. A second later, it burst apart in an explosion of black fire and red lightning. Ichigo sped out of the blast and scored a hit, slashing across Nemesis' stomach. He ducked under a retaliatory swing at his neck, but was caught by a kick to the jaw. Righting himself, he quickly evaded a volley of smaller skulls sent his way, then responded with a wide Getsuga Tensho. Nemesis glided out of the energy wave's path, only to hear a cry of Reiga Tensho, before getting struck by an arc of red lightning intertwined with Getsuga Tensho energy. As his twitching muscles were still recovering, Ichigo was suddenly right in front of him, slamming a punch into his chest using his free fist, whilst roaring Ryu. The chain lightning detonations forced a cry of pain from the hostile fragment's throat as he began to drop down. He regained his bearing and righted himself just in time to dodge a spear of black flame that his opponent had launched towards him. Nemesis retaliated by speeding upwards to meet the rapidly descending Soul Reaper. Both combatants swung their respective blades, except Nemesis ducked at the last second and shoulder barged Ichigo in the gut. As soon as the teen wheezed and doubled over, Nemesis grabbed his face and released a blast of energy at point-blank range. Fortunately, Ichigo was able to coat himself in his spiritual power and absorb the attack, suffering minimal injury despite being flung away. The pair regarded each other silently for a few seconds. Then, they rushed to clash once more, Ichigo's black Bankai wreathed in black fire and sparking with red lightning, whilst Nemesis' sword was enshrouded with Necros purple energy and extended in length. Meanwhile, Loki had summoned Fenrir's two children to fight alongside their father. Irina, Zenovia, Rosweiss, Sona, and Rias were holding out, wary of the wolves' fangs and claws. They were still able to put up a good fight though, keeping the pressure on the legendary beasts through combinations of their respective abilities and well-timed attacks coupled with seamless teamwork. Varley's team also provided them with valuable support, though they were mostly occupied in dealing with the fragment that accompanied Nemesis and the soldiers that it generated. Kuro, Nina, and Shadow assisted them against the swarm of enemies. The twin dragon emperors streaked through the sky as they battled the Norse trickster. Loki's magic was powerful and precise, forcing them to take evasive maneuvers multiple times to avoid any crippling injuries. Their silver-haired enemy seemed ecstatic at fighting the two legendary dragons hosts simultaneously. Issei launched a dragon shot. Loki evaded it, however that was what Varley had been counting on. The dark silver-haired teen fired his own volley of energy blasts. Unfortunately, Loki erected a magic barrier that completely blocked them. "You've already learnt Norse magic to such a degree," Loki observed. "Impressive, but not enough to harm me, boy." Varley grunted in annoyance and glided back to Issei's side, preparing for another attempt. The battle continued on all fronts. The only noticeable progress was on the group against Fenrir and his offspring. The wolves were being kept back by the ranged fighters and their magic abilities. Ichigo very nearly hacked off Nemesis' right arm, but the fragment dodged and received a slash across his torso instead. The orange-haired substitute was struck by an ethereal skull for his trouble, the oversized forehead ramming him away. Another followed up, trying to bite and bisect him. He destroyed it using a Getsuga infused with his Inferno Bolt's flames. Suddenly, a communication magic circle appeared near all of the friends. Odin's voice came through. "Brats, Mjolnir's arrived." A golden glow began to emanate from some of the clouds in the artificial dimension sky. "The chain should be along shortly too. Seize your victory." A large, golden hammer slowly descended from the clouds, a golden of light surrounding it. The teenage Soul Reaper locked blades as he clashed with his foe once again. Seeing that his friend was still occupied, and that he was closer anyway, Issei started flying through the air towards Mjolnir. Without warning, Fenrir leaped into the air at the armor-clad pawn. Everyone's eyes widened in horrified shock when they witnessed the massive wolf bite into Issei, piercing through the boosted geese. Balance breaker as though it wasn't even there. The teen let out a scream of agony. Fenrir swung his head to the side and tossed Issei without any care. As he dropped to the ground, his scale mail disintegrated, revealing his multiple bite wounds that were bleeding out profusely. Rhea screamed out his name and rushed over to where he was plummeting towards. "Wow, that was incredibly reckless, not to mention a little stupid," Nemesis commented in an offhand manner. Loki was watching everything with a sneer of twisted amusement on his face. The hostile fragment, as well as everyone else, felt a sudden, violent spike of power from Ichigo. Black energy with a crimson outline was uncontrollably flooding out from the spiky-haired hero whilst he roared in unbridled rage. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he heard his hollow shout for him to calm down, but he paid it no heed. It was bad enough that one of his friends had been injured, possibly fatally, however it was the blatant disregard and mocking that really set him off. His roaring turned dual-toned as even more hollow spiritual power leaked out of his form, quickly obscuring him from view. A second later, they all heard his voice become something primal and animalistic. The black energy burst into a geyser just as the enraged roaring stopped. Nobody dared to breathe as the energy slowly dissipated. When they could finally see Ichigo again, many of them gasped. The upper half of his clothing, already slightly damaged from fighting, was now almost completely shredded away. The sacred gear covering his forearms and shins started sparking, then burst apart in a shower of its twin elements. His skin was bone white and his hair had lengthened considerably. The hole in his chest surprised those that hadn't already witnessed his previous hollow transformation, but the demonic, horned skull grabbed all of their attention. Kuroka and Koenko dropped to the ground, their senjutsu senses being overwhelmed by the intense rage rolling off Ichigo's new form. The sisters stared at him in fright and concern. They couldn't detect anything from him besides primal, instinctual anger. He likely didn't even have any conscious control in this state, and that scared them. Everything was deathly silent, until Nemesis whistled. "What's this?" "The next evolution of your previous transformation." He received no response. "How intriguing," Loki mused with a smirk. "The boy warrior has a demon slumbering within him. And his sacred gear has been forcibly dismissed." In an instant, Ichigo disappeared then reappeared before the cloaked fragment. Capitalizing on his enemy's surprise, the hollowified teen gripped the fragment by the face. Within the next second, his sword was cutting the being apart from the head down, a black Getsuga surging within its confines. After cleaving his into two, he quickly raised his Bankai blade and released the Getsuga Tensho that had built up within it, completely destroying the body. There was a loud, inhuman screech as Nemesis threw a titanic energy skull towards him, jaw open and spewing out smaller skulls. Merely turning towards the direction of the incoming attack, Ichigo remained still as it drew ever closer. A moment before it would impact, he vanished in a burst of Sonido, repositioning behind the array of skulls. Giving a loud, dual-tone roar, a ball of crimson energy charged up between his horns, then shot towards Nemesis' move. The second it made contact, it exploded and wiped out the skulls before disappearing. Nemesis rushed into attack. Ichigo effortlessly deflected the fragment sword, then grabbed his throat with his free hand. Hoisting Nemesis up, Ichigo ruthlessly stabbed his black blade through his opponent's chest. He roared as a pillar of crimson energy was released from his body, blasting the fragment down to the rocky ground. The move was in the game Soul Resurrection. Can't remember what it's called though. The holwified substitute held out his right hand, as though reaching for something. His weapon removed itself from Nemesis' body and flew back to his grasp. Raising it above his head, a swirling vortex of Getsuga energy suddenly erupted out of the Zanpakuto. Ichigo swung down, sending the colossal wave down to crash into his enemy. After the technique dispersed, Ichigo used Sonido to travel next to Nemesis' down form. Before the fragment could even do anything, the teenager impaled his sword through the fragment's head. Nemesis shuddered, then quickly broke down into tiny black particles. Fenrir pounced out of nowhere, aiming to bite the teen. To everyone's amazement, Ichigo blinked out of the way and gripped the oversized wolf by the tail. Twisting around, he savagely hurled the beast into a cliff wall, followed by a Sero. Fenrir's two children ended up getting the same treatment when he sped over to them. Loki began to unexpectedly laugh loudly. "Wonderful! Such rage and carnage! You would fit in perfectly with Ragnarok once I initiate it." A slight growl came from Ichigo when he turned to face the infamous trickster. "Come, beast!" Loki challenged. "I shall put you in your place." Instantly, Ichigo was in front of Loki, his sword already striking. A magic barrier appeared at the last second, saving his head from decapitation. The barrier shattered and Odin's mischievous son was thrown back, disbelief written across his features. Ichigo roared loudly, his fanged jaws opening wide as a burst of crimson energy surged around him. Soon, the blue lightning and red flames of his sacred Gi's base form also surrounded him. Everyone observed in silent, somewhat morbid fascination as the spectral form of the shock burner tried to manifest over his hands, only to blink out and try again. Issy was healed up and saved from death thanks to Ravel's gift to him when they met, a vial of phoenix tears. The brown-haired devil felt slightly guilty that he'd inadvertently caused his friend's berserk state. The shock burner tried manifesting again, except this time it seemed to remain, albeit still appearing spectral. Without warning, it exploded into a myriad of shards that started orbiting the hollowified Soul Reaper rapidly. The two elements surrounding him intensified and focused around the shards of his sacred gear. Growing irritated, Loki let loose a large blast of magic. Ichigo waited for it to approach calmly. He reared his free hand back and clenched it into a fist. Punching forward, he made contact with the magic projectile. The sacred gear shard circling him suddenly rushed forth in a spiraling corkscrew, shredding through Loki's magic and slamming into him. Loki shouted out in pain when the pyroelectric drill assaulted him. Singed and shocked, he fell from his position in the sky. Only for Ichigo to flash over to his position and deliver a powerful backhand strike to his face, forcibly altering his trajectory and turning his entire body. His impromptu fall was once more interrupted when the hollow slammed the hilt of his bankai into his back, resulting in a sharp crack. As Loki dropped down, he caught sight of another Sero charging up between the boys, the demon's horns, this one far dwarfing any of the previous ones. His eyes widened in alarm just as Ichigo unleashed the Sero Gigante. The orb of power crashed into its target and slammed the trickster into the unforgiving ground before exploding. When the light died down and everyone could see again, they were met with the spectacle of Loki lying down on the ground. His clothes were ruined and he was covered in burns and injuries. He coughed and spluttered out curses at the floating hollow, his shattered sacred gear no longer present. Without a word, Ichigo used Sonido to reach the airborne Jolner and grabbed it with his free hand. The mystic hammer grew in size and took on a much darker appearance, gaining a predominantly black theme with trims of red. The two ends used for attacking grew for spikes, one at each corner. Loki cried out in alarm when Ichigo sped over to his down form, corrupted hammer held high menacingly. A strangled sound of pain left his mouth when it was smashed into his torso, the spikes piercing through his flesh. He glared balefully at the transformed teen as an array of sealing circles converged on him. The orange-haired hollow relinquished his hold on Jolner, allowing it to revert to its usual form. He turned to face the friends, causing them all to tense up in apprehension. Slowly, he stalked towards them a few paces, then stopped and stood motionless. Trembling like a leaf in the wind, Koneko took slow, hesitant steps towards him. Ichigo let out a warning growl, prompting the others to call out for her to withdraw. She gently shook her head in defiance and continued moving closer to her brother figure. She had dismissed her Nekomata features and was suppressing her sensory abilities in an effort to withstand the twisted presence he gave off. "Nii-san," she asked worriedly. The only reply she got was another growl. Can you hear me, Nii-san?" The petite rook remained where she was, unsure whether or not she should press on, or if she even should. Ichigo couldn't seem to control himself in this form. She didn't want to provoke him into attacking her. She felt a hand gently take a hold of her shoulder supportively and craned her head to look. Kuroka smiled at her despite the wariness she herself felt. "Don't force yourself, Shironi. We can go to him together." Her younger sister nodded affirmatively. "Nii-san," Koneko called out again once she resumed her steady approach, her sister holding her supportively. "It's okay, the battle is over, Nii-san, you won." Another growl, this time accompanied by a twitch of the sword hand. "Please stop, Nii-san, you're scaring me. Please go back to your usual kind and caring self, the you that gave me a home. The you who took me in as a sister, and who I love very much." In a flash, the hollow raised his blade and took a step forward before jerking and freezing up. Ichigo lowered Tensor Zangetsu slowly. He remained tense and motionless all the way until Koneko and Kuroka reached him. Everyone waited with bated breath. Kuroka released the younger Nekishu's shoulders, allowing her to cautiously step forward and lift her arms to encircle them around the Soul Reaper's torso. The girl suppressed a shudder as she came into contact with his exposed skin, finding it unnaturally cold. A low, rumbling sound came from Ichigo, followed up by quiet words in his dual-tone voice. Koneko. Family. Protect her. Something jostled within Ichigo's mind, along with receiving a figurative kickstart from his inner hollow. His left hand immediately whipped up to his head, grabbing one of the horns in a vice. With a shout, he broke it off, then smashed his fist into the mask, shattering it. To everyone else's amazement, the hollowified skin began to crack and flake away, revealing his normal body underneath. The orange-haired protector stumbled, but steadied himself with a hand on his surrogate sister's shoulder. His mouth twitched into a somewhat weary smile, which she returned with a relieved one. "Sorry for worrying you guys," he said apologetically, ruffling her white hair. She leaned into his palm happily. "I'm glad you're back to normal, Nii-san." Breathing a sigh of relief, the rest of their friends regrouped with them and awaited for Ajuka to bring them out of the dimension. There was a bit of a fiasco when they discovered that Varley and his team, minus Kuroka, had captured Fenrir with the chain and promptly left. As it turned out, that had actually been one of their main goals since the very beginning. Still, they took comfort in the fact that they had come out of the fight relatively unharmed despite Issei's close call. Kuroka officially left Varley's team and moved in with Ichigo and his other housemates. ORC, a few days later. Ross Weiss was pitifully curled up and crouched on the floor, tears streaming from her eyes. Turns out that Odin had all but ditched her and headed back on his own. Needless to say, the girl's already low self-esteem took a rather big hit, evidenced by her going into another self-depreciating ramble, along with how she was now financially doomed. Ichigo crouched down beside her and laid a hand on her shoulder comfortingly. "Hey, don't cry, Ross Weiss," he soothed. "Yeah, Odin is a perv and a jerk, especially for just abandoning you like that, but you know what? Screw him." The silver-haired Valkyrie stared at him in a mix of surprise and confusion. He flashed her one of his rare smiles. "Personally, I think it's his loss. You're a young genius who can hold herself well in a fight, you've got crazy talent with magic, and you're pretty cute too. If he couldn't see how much of a great person you are, then I'd say he's pretty stupid. I'm sure something will work out for you here. Besides, you've got me and your other friends here who are willing to help you out." Ross Weiss' face gained a dusting of red prior to the girl latching onto the teenage hero in a thankful hug. "I'm glad to hear that. Thank you, all of you." Kuroka had an unamused pout whilst she observed, but decided to cut the Valkyrie some slack just this once. Rias practically glided over to Ross Weiss and gently nudged her shoulder, a happy smile adorning her features. "I believe I have a proposition for you. A very good one, if I say so myself. Here are the papers detailing the finer points." The silver-haired girl stood up and took the offered sheets. Moments later, her eyes widened in joyous disbelief. "The pay is this much per month. And my only duties are these." "Yes. We also have various reward and benefit schemes that can be added on too if you wish," Rias informed, her smile still in full force. Everyone else chuckled at the RSR business mode of Persona. "I'll take it." Ross Weiss cheered. "Thank you, Rias-sama." Ichigo felt Kuroka step up to his side and rest her head on his shoulder. A small blush came across his cheeks from a bit of embarrassment and lingering awkwardness, but he smiled down at her all the same. She flashed him one of her signature mischievous grins. All in all, everything seemed to be going along all right. "Oh make." Everyone watched in shock as the fully hollowified Ichigo defeated Loki using a Acero Gigante. His overwhelming spiritual pressure and power kept them rooted to the spot. Once the light died down and the dust cleared, they saw the transformed teen standing stoically, simply staring in their direction, the menacing, horned mask obscuring any expression that might have been on his face. Unexpectedly, Kuroka began slowly approaching him, causing his full focus to shift to her. Her steps were careful and non-threatening, however Ichigo's muscles still tensed, as though preparing to retaliate. Kuroka continued undeterred, although her eyes seemed somewhat cloudy and glazed. The black-haired Nekashu finally stood right in front of him. The silence was tense as the others observed. A low warning growl came from Ichigo. After a moment of nothing from either individual, the hollow-eyed Soul Reapers' muscles relaxed as he deemed the girl non-hostile. Suddenly, Kuroka's eye seemed to light up and she gave an excited squeal while lunging forward. She caught the off-guard substitute in a tight hug, pinning his arms to his sides and nuzzling her face against the crook of his neck elatedly. "Tall, strong and sexy," Kuroka exclaimed gleefully as she continued hugging and nuzzling. "Jackpot Naya, Tilda." What made the situation even more unbelievable was that Ichigo's head suddenly whipped towards their spectating friends, as though pleading them for help. Unfortunately, nobody knew quite how to react to what they were seeing.